Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Waterloo Council meeting, Monday, May 27th at 6:30 p.m. Discussion of the Government of Ontario Bill 108 really draws a big crowd tonight, so it's good to see. First up is disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof or retraction thereof. Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you very much. I would like to retract my earlier disclosure of interest, as I've been given more information and I no longer am in conflict.
Wonderful, thank you. Next up, we have a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. Next up, item 5 is approval of minutes. We have a set of 4 minutes there, moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's all of us. Item 6, reports of committees, 2 sets of reports there. Councillor Veith and Councillor Henry would like to move those. All those in favor? That's all of us. No items on consent. Already up to item number 8. Who says government isn't fast? Item number 8, Senior of the Year. And to do the introductions, I'm going to call upon Rick Chambers. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Mayor. Boy, that was fast. I told these guys it'd be a snooze fest. It's not going to be that at all. Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, guests, and family and friends of our honoree, I'm Rick Chambers, as Mayor Jaworski has said. I'm a member of the Age-Friendly Multi-Agency Committee, and it's my great pleasure this evening to commend to you our Senior of the Year. Before I do that, however, I'd like to recognize members of the Age-Friendly Committee who are here tonight. Marcia Smelly, Sushma Jolly, and Jennifer Flagler-George and Arlene Groh. And I'd also like to recognize the contributions to this event that Jay Kuntz and Jim Bowman have made, staff members here at the City of Waterloo. The Age-Friendly Multi-Age Committee is responsible for soliciting nominations from the community for Senior of the Year. As you may know, the Senior of the Year must be at least 65 years old and live, see, that got a laugh. They know Gene. As you may know, the Senior of the Year must be at least 65 years old and live in the City of Waterloo. Other criteria include contributions to the community, participation in groups and organizations, leadership, and citizenship. With a panel of age-friendly committee members, 2 older adult volunteers, Terry Weldon and Jim Robinson, and staff member Jay Kuntz, we solicited nominations from the community. Nominations had to include the candidate's contributions to life in the community, the roles that the person fulfilled, his or her commitment to and participation in the organizations, and the ways in which the individual acted as a role model, mentor, whether overtly or tacitly, acted as a community leader. Meeting and exceeding all of those criteria, we would like to congratulate this year's Senior of the Year, Gene Hoffman. Gene, would you roll here? And at this time, I'd like to ask Councillor Sandra Hanmer to outline some of Gene's accomplishments.
Thank you very much, and congratulations, Jean. It gives me great pleasure to let you know a little bit more about all the many things that Jean does for our community. Jean is a retired Waterloo Region District School Board elementary school teacher and someone who taught what was once called home economics. Since retirement, Jean has devoted much of her time to assisting others in the City of Waterloo and surrounding area. Tireless work in the service of others is a theme of Jean's volunteerism. As a faithful member of First United Church in Uptown Waterloo, most weeks Jean visits shut-ins and members who can no longer attend church on their own. This includes visits to long-term care facilities all over Waterloo Region. Jean is also part of the team that prepares lunch every Tuesday for hundreds of people who attend the church's free noon hour concerts. She is the secretary of the United Church Women's Group and monitors the distribution of the church newsletter. Jean has contributed her talents as a seamstress to assist those who need clothing adjustments. She creates quiet books, hand-sewn discovery books for children, available at Schneider House, and as a gift for new mothers. Jean also naturally makes her own greeting cards and get well cards for friends and those recovering from illnesses. As a neighbor, Jean took the lead in helping to beautify the grounds of her housing development and her own property as a showplace for gardening love and expertise. Whether it's baking muffins for recently arrived neighbors or assisting a newly widowed neighbor with the paperwork and transportation to local agencies, Jean takes the initiative to assist those in need. The Silver Spoons Luncheon is a regular Tuesday event for older adults in Uptown Waterloo. 4 churches take turns hosting the luncheon, and Jean is a regular contributor with the First United cohort. The Canadian Council for the Blind has a monthly luncheon, and Jean can be seen there as well, helping to prepare and serve the meal. Jean Hoffman's style of volunteerism, quiet, efficient, thoughtful, independent, generous, and self-starting, has inspired others to volunteer as well. Jean has helped to add volunteers to the Hospice Waterloo gardening program, the Noon Hour concert luncheon preparation team, and the Canadian Council for the Blind luncheons. When not serving others, Jean loves to travel and extends invitations to friends and family to join her. She jokingly acknowledges that she's on the first-name basis with many of the WestJet personnel at the KW airport. As the nominator for Jean wrote, Jean Hoffman is not interested in the spotlight or in praise. She is most absorbed with service to others, hospitality, and outreach, and in the process, making the city of Waterloo a healthy and welcoming place to live. One of the panel members of the Senior of the Year Committee commented, "I wish I had a neighbor like Jean Hoffman." Congratulations, Jean. The City of Waterloo is pleased to honor and name you as our Senior of the Year for 2019.
Sounds like you never sleep, Jean, but keep up the good work. Mr. Chagger also gave you a congratulatory scroll, and there goes the special gift bag. We don't know what's in it, but there's quite a bit in it. So, because I did take away, so Mike now can say a few words.
When I read the record this morning, I looked at the weather and it said it was to be a great day, and it really was. Then I looked at my horoscope and it said, "Tonight, just be you." Very appropriate. I don't know how I can just be me at this celebration like this. I want to thank Dave and the City Council for this award. It's a great honor to be the recipient. Waterloo is an awesome city. A lot of it is because of our volunteers. I don't think we could keep things running so well if it wasn't for all the volunteers in the Twin Cities. I want to thank a number of people. I want to thank Rick Chambers for heading up the committee and keeping me on time and breaking the news to me. When he called me, I said, "I don't think you got the right person here, you know?" It's nice to meet people from the city. I've often seen your names in the paper, but not to meet you in person. I want to thank my dear friend Edith, who submitted my name. She's done as much volunteering as I have, and she should be sharing in this reward as well. And I want to thank my friend Shirley and our minister from First United, Nora, who wrote letters for the award. People wrote letters to me and sent emails and pictures. It's been marvelous to get all these things from it. I want to thank all the people that came tonight, my friends, my neighbors, my church family, my relatives, and other volunteers. Thank you so much for all your help. Don't forget, tomorrow we have Silver Spoons at 8:30. I think you've pretty well found out or heard all the things that I try to accomplish, but I love to work at Snyder House, welcoming visitors, making costumes for the children's programs, helping with the Easter egg hunt, helping 500 kids find Easter eggs, working in the gift shop, and then doing the gardening at the hospice. Tom and Lynn, who are here tonight, are our special gardeners, and we've learned so much from them. Tom always likes to tell that I taught his wife. The Silver Spoons, it's a program for the seniors. One interesting story I have, that one lady came in and sat down and I said, I think I taught you. And she said, yes, you did. I said, I think we're in the wrong place. I should be sitting at the table and you should be serving me. But she didn't offer. And the noon hour concert at 7 o'clock in the morning, 3 of us go in and make up the fillings for the sandwiches. And then another group comes in and makes the sandwiches. They had me over tonight for a wonderful dinner and this lovely corsage. And thank you for this corsage as well from the city. It's a great time to solve our problems, but we're not doing a very good job, I don't think. Sometimes we'll work till 9 o'clock and then I'm off to Probus. And at my Probus Club, I'm the head of the travel committee, so I'm planning trips all the time for people. So I do get some time to do some things for myself. I love to visit in the nursing homes. I have one friend who's 91 years of age, and she's just so with it. She knows so much about sports teams. She knows everybody on the Blue Jays team, but we're not doing very well with them either this year. And then I have another little friend on the other end of the spectrum who I'm teaching how to sew, a little 11-year-old girl. And she has a great time with doing her sewing projects. So the other day she was at my place and I have a little music box and it's like a little sewing machine. And there's little mice sitting on it. When you turn the wheel, the little mice go around and thread the machine. And she said, this is really nice. Where did you get it? And I said, oh, somebody gave it to me for my birthday. But I said, if you like it, I said, one of these days I'm going to give it to you. And she said, well, why would you do that? And I said, well, you know, I'm getting a little bit older. And I said, I may have to go into a nursing home or a retirement home. And I said, I can't take all this stuff with me. She said, let's not talk about that right now. Her grandmother and grandfather are here tonight, by the way. So thanks again for this being recognized. It's been a wonderful experience, and I thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Jean, and thank you, Rick Chambers. I'm happy that we actually found Jean at home when you made that call to let her know. You probably had to call like 10 times. So wish you all the best. Thank you for what you do for Waterloo, Jean. And we'll just wait a moment and while people move to the back of the room. Now, while people are moving out, I will go back to Councillor Freeman. You said you wanted to disclose something for the clerks.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jaworski. It's with regard to item number H. So that is it 10H? Yeah, 10H.
Okay,
With regard to my place of business.
okay. Gotcha. And next up momentarily, we'll have the Kitchener-Waterloo Woodworking and Craft Center. So I'll invite you to the podium, and Jim Bowman's going to do some quick introductions. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Members of Council, as Gene Huffman just said, Waterloo is an awesome city, and it's true. Our next presentation is from another awesome group called the Kitchener-Waterloo Woodworking and Craft Center, and there's 3 representatives tonight who wish to inform Council of the work that they do at the Craft Center. Warren Law.
Thank you. Welcome, Warren, Margaret, and David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, for the opportunity to speak to you. The Kitchener-Waterloo Woodworking Club and Craft Centre began a long time ago with a woodworking group that started in Waterloo as Project Woodwork in 1974-75. Grants from the Federal New Horizon and support from the City of Waterloo saw the group quickly grow and have 3 different locations before they found a more permanent home behind the log schoolhouse. This took a period of about 25 years. In 2000, the City of Kitchener woodworkers began a quest for a woodworking shop, and in 2004 they were able to create the Kitchener Woodworking and Craft Club. In 2005, Kitchener asked the Kitchener group asked the group of people in Waterloo. I'll get this out eventually. Yeah, and through the assistance of both cities, we were able to create the Kitchener-Waterloo Woodworking and Craft Center in 2006, and was at 173B Roger Street. This was a timely move, apparently, because the health department declared the shop in Waterloo Park unsuitable. The center ran well on Roger Street for 11 years, and then the lease finally expired, and it was necessary to find a new place. We are currently at 123 Ottawa Street South, Unit 2. The primary goal of the center is to provide a safe, comfortable, and inspirational place where members can express themselves through the many aspects of working with wood. The center strives to provide opportunities for members to learn themselves through the many aspects that are available, and we provide opportunities for members to learn new skills, to share their knowledge with others, a teaching component, and to enable healthy, active lifestyles. The center achieves its goal with a large part due to the volunteer members who ensure that the shop is open and operational. As many as 25 to 30 members serve on either as volunteers or the board, and occasionally on both. Being a volunteer is an opportunity for members to give back to the organization to which they are deeply committed. An example of this commitment was that they even carried on regular meetings at the City Cafe on Charles Street, waiting for the new shop to open and be renovated. I'll pass you to Margaret.
Now, Warren and Margaret, I've noticed that you have a presentation here. Is that pictures for later? I see that on the screen.
Yeah.
We'll do the pictures at the end.
We just have
Good. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
We now have over 200 members. Typically, 150 members renew annually in late December and early January, while others come in as they learn about our facility. Our membership ranges in age from 18 to 90, while the skill levels go from novice to experienced. The makeup of the group looks a lot like the people you see on the streets of our cities. About 15% of our members are women, and we support a small number of members with physical and or mental challenges. Some members join primarily to complete a project, while others like the fact that the shop is available to them whenever it's needed. And they continue as members year after year. Approximately 20% of our members sign in daily. The center has an elected board that meets monthly, except for July and August, to review operation and management of the center. The board hears reports from the shop manager, safety committee, and treasurer, and addresses any current issues of significance. The board also chairs an annual general meeting for all members. The volunteer group, headed by the shop manager and including all shop volunteers, also meets monthly to discuss issues around supervision and the safe and efficient running of the shop. Appropriate concerns are referred to the board for consideration. The center gives back to the region's community in a number of ways. Outreach activities include bird or bee house building at Earth Day in Waterloo, Bright Up Summer Camp, and Kids Ability. The house components are cut and organized at the shop, and volunteers help the children put them together. Bright Up Center has been a financial supporter of our shop, and in return, our members have created outdoor furniture and decorations for their gardens. We recently assisted in the workshops in the Makerspace Underground at the museum, and we annually donate 20 to 60 wooden toys, which include planes, cars, train sets, or construction trucks, to the Christmas toy drive. Members of our community routinely bring in items for repair or completion. There is no charge, but we accept donations to the center in appreciation for the time and labor. We set up a booth at the Wood Art in the City show held each year at Rim Park. This, along with our website and annual open house, provides an opportunity to introduce the center to individuals in the community who are interested in woodworking. The open house is typically in mid-November. The shop is open to visitors, and volunteers are available to give tours and explain how the shop operates. In addition, there is a selection of items made in the shop and donated by members that are for sale. Proceeds from the sale are donated to the shop. Our credibility and successful operation have been noted in other communities, with inquiries from other centers in Waterloo Region, Barrie, Toronto, and Hamilton about how and why our program works and succeeds. Dave Pearson is the last.
I'm going to tell you just a little about our physical facility and our funding. Our current shop is part of a single-story industrial building with parking for up to 22 vehicles, including 2 handicap spaces. We have 5,500 square feet of floor space. There's a board meeting room, which also serves as a lunchroom. There are 3 shop areas, a machine room, a space with workbenches where hand assembly can be accomplished, and a carving finishing center. We are open 6 days and 4 evenings for a total of 46 hours per week. In summer, the daytime hours are the same, but the shop is only open for 2 evenings. As far as funding goes, we receive funding from the City of Waterloo and the City of Kitchener. This money is used to pay our lease and utilities, and our members currently pay $225 for a full year membership, and that money is used to pay for shop operation. Our expenses include a part-time secretary, insurance, waste disposal, and replacement of supplies and upgrading machines and infrastructure. Over the years, we have applied for and received Ontario Trillium funds as well as federal New Horizons money, and we're currently in a positive financial state and expect that it will continue that way. We do have long-term concerns about our current facility since the lease is for just 5 years, but we're assuming that that lease will be renewed. However, we keep an eye on the future and do what we can to ensure that our success will continue. Our experience has shown us that it is expensive to move, and we're determined to survive any future moves that may be visited upon us. Again, we're very grateful to the City of Waterloo for their continued support of our center. And if we have a very short little slideshow, if we could have that.
Well done, thank you. Are there any questions from council or comments? I wanted to find out, when is the next open house? I've been there and always leave with some gem, but when is the open house and
It's
sale?
usually the third Saturday in November.
In November?
Yep,
Okay,
but we'll let you know.
wonderful. No, it's a
We
great
are-
opportunity for sure.
We also have cards here. We're encouraging women and men to join. So if you want to take a card just to see when it's open,
Wonderful.
you'll be more than welcome.
I'll count on everybody who comes to that microphone tonight to take at least 2 cards to hand out to friends, so. Councillor Henry?
Not a question, but just as a comment. My former neighbor across the hall from me was now the late Peter Kipp, who was, as you know, a very involved and engaged member for a number of years in the woodworking center. Unfortunately, he passed on quite recently. But I know my wife and I are blessed every day to have a little shelving unit that we've got in our laundry room and the doorstop for our door that he'd made probably in that center and brought back for us. And I know the doorstop we use every single day as we try to roll our stroller in and out of the front door before it closes on us, which it tends to do much faster than we can move. So appreciate the work that not just the center as a whole does for providing people a space, but for individual members to really help build small portions of community and connections and leave those little trinkets and those memories scattered across the entire region. So thank you for everything you keep doing.
Yeah, certainly a place well worth visiting for the open house, and timely with Christmas coming then. So, thank you, and please pass along our thanks and congratulations to everybody else at the woodworking shop from the city. Next up, we're into staff reports. Closeout of the 2015-2018 City of Waterloo Strategic Plan and the 2019-2022 City of Waterloo Draft Strategic Plan, prepared by Anna Marie Cipriani and Shelley Reed. Welcome, Anna Marie.
Good evening. So our intention tonight is twofold. One, to close out the 2015 to 2018 strategic plan, and two, to finalize a draft of our 2019-2022 strategic plan. So I have two individuals with me tonight, Shelley Reed, who's in our communications team. You may not have seen her on the front lines yet, but she has been working with me along this project. And now what's really important about communications is as we move a plan forward and to speak of it, both inwardly and out to the community, Shelley will take a really active role with that communication skill set to do that. And Margot Bejen, who you know, she will take over the podium and walk you through the strategic plan framework as it is now, and we'll work through that this evening, and then we can discuss next steps. Thanks.
Welcome, Margot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again for the opportunity to be here. If I may indulge just for a moment to bring the members of the public up to speed on the process so far, just in terms of the strategic plan has been in development since last fall, and it has been through a series of validations with staff and with the public, some 11,000 plus different inputs into getting us where we are today. So the objective this evening is to review and validate the strategic goals and objectives as discussed at the last session with council. We've added some narrative that we'll share and go through and make sure that it reflects council's wishes. We'll talk up to the vision and mission and guiding principles that again were discussed in the last working sessions. And then I'll defer back to Anna Marie and Shelley to talk about next steps. So of the emerging strategic themes and priorities, I'm not going to focus in on the specific objectives because I think council's very familiar with them. But what's new for this evening is some of the narrative and the prose that we've assigned as directed by council. And just want to validate that this indeed reflects the direction that council would like to see reflected. So in terms of the pillar for equity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging, what we've said is that in creating a city that supports a strong sense of belonging and access to opportunity for all, we recognize that our operations, programs, and approach to service delivery should consider circumstances and solutions that respond to systemic barriers. And if I can go through this, or if you have questions with each pillar or comment, whatever works best for you, Mr. Mayor.
Why don't we get through it and then go back if people
Certainly.
see necessary?
Okay. Whoops, wrong one. And with respect to the pillar for sustainability in the environment, the City of Waterloo is committed to environmental, economic, and social sustainability. It recognizes its leadership role in minimizing its environmental impact, prudently managing financial resources, considering current and future needs, and creating processes, systems, and relationships that promote social sustainability and actively contribute to a healthy and livable communities. And the strategic objectives have been updated to reflect the input of council, especially draw your attention to number 2, enable bold local actions to address the climate change crisis. With respect to our third strategic pillar, safe and sustainable transportation, what we've arrived at is safe and sustainable transportation exists when all users and all modes of transportation are able to share roadways and trail systems safely, when traffic speeds respect the safety of the community, when policy and planning supports the development and maintenance of sustainable infrastructure, and when more residents are able to rely on sustainable modes of transportation, such as public transit or active transportation, to get where they need to go. The fourth pillar, healthy community and resilient neighborhoods. Investing in the capacity of people to work together to resolve challenges and maximize opportunities helps to build healthy, resilient neighborhoods that collectively form our community. The city is committed to continuously creating and improving physical and social environments and to enhancing resources to foster collaboration, community pride, healthy neighborhoods, and strong community. And we've certainly seen that reflected in the earlier presentations this evening. Fifth pillar is infrastructure renewal. And we know that careful, future-focused planning ensures that the city can respond to infrastructure needs today and into the future, ensuring that the city maintains existing infrastructure while planning for new growth and development. Our sixth pillar, economic growth and development. The goal being to foster a robust and diversified economy. The goal of economic growth and development is to create a diverse economy that works for all, where all can work. The city is committed to placing emphasis on fostering job growth that maximizes opportunities within the local labor market through the provision of employment that aligns with supply and demand. So are there any questions or comments? The intent of presenting this evening is to validate that the prose that we've added does in fact reflect council's wishes and the direction that we wanted to move in. There are the goal statements, we had some discussion whether or not we wanted to include goal statements and the narrative prose, so there may be some thoughts on that, but we wanted to put both before you for your consideration.
Any comments at this time? Oh, Councillor Hammer, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you. Margot, thank you for the review so far. I think you've done a fairly good job at trying to look at all the information that we had suggested and put together. And I like a number of the wording changes that you've made. I do think it's helpful to have both the goal statement and also the narrative to answer that last question. One thing that's striking me a little bit, and perhaps it's something that will come in next step kinds of things, I'm still struggling a little bit with the objectives being measurable. And how are we going to know that we've made a difference? So I won't go through each one of them, but it's just a general comment that we need to be able to say 3 years from now, what difference did we make? And I'm not sure that we're there quite yet. And that may be a step that's still coming.
And actually, concurrently, what has happened is we've developed a business planning template tool that those key performance measures are embedded in that tool. So it certainly feeds up to the strategic objectives and would support the creation of a community dashboard, for example. Council could determine that of these key performance indicators, these are the metrics that we would like to publicly share on an ongoing basis to track progress. So that connection is there, but that is, for the time being, has been more staff focused in terms of supporting the development of departmental business plans.
Okay, great. So still more to come on that one through you, Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Bodley, please.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you again. Appreciate the work here. And I just wanted to say, I know as we're getting towards the end of this has been my favorite thing that we've worked on since I've been elected here, and it's extremely important, and I'm really excited to see what the final result is. And I appreciate all the hard work that everybody's done here at the city and the consultants as well here. I had a couple of questions or comments, I guess. The first one was in the equity, inclusion, and sense of belonging pillar. Under the objectives, I noticed that previous conversations we had an objective pertaining to income inequality, and that doesn't seem to be in the draft report anymore. And I'm curious what happened to that, I guess.
My understanding is that and I mean, this is certainly, we can revisit that. The idea was more to look at it from a systemic perspective in terms of how the city can change or adapt how it behaves and how it acts. So inherent in the idea of equity is understanding that there are systemic barriers, and not everybody comes to an opportunity with the same advantages, and being able to recognize that there are differences in the way that we need to be able to serve people. So it was intended to be encompassed within these objectives, but if it's council's desire that be specifically mentioned, we can certainly revisit that.
Okay, I would, through you, Mayor Jaworski, I would leave that, I guess, to the rest of the council. I just recall the fourth objective last time that sort of addressed that specifically. Happy to open that up to anybody else if they want to comment on that. But before that, the last comment I have was with respect to infrastructure renewal. Mm-hmm. And I know during our last planning session or discussion on this, infrastructure renewal was part of another pillar, and then we had advised that we wanted it pulled out. And so I think perhaps we didn't get into the nuts and bolts of infrastructure renewal at council because of that. And so in looking at the goal under infrastructure renewal, I'm not sure that the goal is necessarily good, I guess, compared to what I envision with respect to infrastructure renewal. And in particular, personally, I would like to see something talking about the fact that we have an infrastructure deficit at this point in time. Right now, ensuring infrastructure needs through effective planning, while an appropriate goal, doesn't really address the particular issues that we're facing from my perspective with respect to the deficit that we're dealing with in terms of infrastructure. And in that vein, I noted that we didn't talk about engagement strategies underneath that within the objectives for infrastructure renewal, which may well be fine. But if we're not talking about it as a specific objective, I would like to see it within the goal, something that talks about the infrastructure deficit and addressing the infrastructure deficit through effective planning and community engagement. Something to that effect would be my perspective on that. But again, I would open that to my colleagues on council for discussion.
Just for clarification, can you tell me, in terms of deficit, do you mean capacity or deficit in terms of the ability to maintain, in terms of managing, maintaining, and upkeep?
Through Mayor Jaworski. Specifically, I think of the wonderful charts that we have at the open houses that we have that show the quality of our infrastructure declining over time at current funding rates. That's how I'm interpreting deficit, but I'm happy to wordsmith that better if there's a better terminology for that than deficit.
I don't think anybody's shaking their head no. So that is the understanding that we're not funding to keep up with the quality our citizens expect.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vasic, please.
Okay. Thanks. Through you, Mayor. I'd love to see the words income inequality in here. I feel like it's a little bit in economic growth, and development when it says addresses economic disparity, but I don't want to talk necessarily about income inequality and addressing that gap only through economic development. So I don't have a suggestion other than, I support finding a way to put it in there because it's also important to me. The one thing that I wanted to talk about before was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action and how we as a municipality can work to do that work, to understand our own relationship as a municipality and community with the residential schools, and then farther back our history and relationship with First Peoples of this land, and then how do we move forward working alongside in reconciliation. And we had talked about that at our original strat planning session, and then I would have meant to bring it up, and I forgot, kind of just the privilege of not being an Indigenous person who probably would be thinking about that more often. So I'd love to put that back in, and it was as to embed the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in our internal processes and service delivery, something to that effect. Given that we have the calls to action due, there are 15 that call on municipalities specifically, and all levels of government in general, to think about our relationship. So it's my 2 cents.
No, good to have that back in. I think everybody at council and staff are interested in that from a management perspective. Councillor Bonagor.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, as someone who wasn't able to be here through the workshops, I would first like to thank MDB and Anna Marie for making sure I could give my input before that. And I want to thank my colleagues on council for having such fantastic discussions. I've been kept up to date with what you were talking about, and I want to thank you, because the draft that I'm seeing here, I think it's a really strong starting point, and you make a very clear point that it calls for political will, and I think you have friends here. We've got the will, and we're happy to work with you to help make it happen.
We have the will, we just have to find the money. There we go. Any further commentary before we continue on? I think we're good to go.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, council's desire to see where the objective, I think the intent or the hope was to try to cover income disparity under the economic growth model, but it can move back into equity inclusion and a sense of belonging if that's where council feels it best fits. And then the the objective with respect to the truth and reconciliation, does council see that fitting within the equity, inclusion, and sense of belonging strategic pillar? Just want to make sure that we're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think we're seeing equity in the equity pillar. But if there's ever any questions afterwards, I think staff know where to find council.
Yep.
So we're pretty good.
Thank you. Okay. And then council had an opportunity to provide input on revised vision, mission, and guiding principles. So this is really just to review and confirm that this reflects council's final discussions around vision, mission, and guiding principles. So the vision statement for Waterloo. Waterloo is an equitable community that leads the world in learning, discovery, and caring. The mission statement has been updated to reflect the following. The Corporation of the City of Waterloo is committed to supporting sustainable growth, equity, and an inclusive, vibrant community through the delivery of service excellence. We are supported in this effort through a team of volunteers, staff, and elected officials that share a commitment to fiscal responsibility, healthy and safe workplace, effective engagement, and personal leadership. And with respect to the guiding principles that have emerged through our work together, we've added some additional pros to try to put some behavioral statements to these guiding principles. So of the guiding principle of equity and inclusion, the aim of equity is to ensure that everyone has access to equal opportunity and benefits. This principle recognizes that treating everyone equitably requires an acknowledgement of unique circumstances and taking steps to eliminate systemic barriers. An inclusive city is one that recognizes and values its differences and diversity in planning, decision-making, and service delivery. And the thought with guiding principles is that they are the overarching theme that impacts all decisions and all activities of the city. Sustainability, again, another guiding principle, refers to the concept of meeting present needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainability considers environmental impact as well as impact on social and economic resources. Fiscal responsibility is a third guiding principle. Entails operating within a framework and policies and processes intended to improve fiscal outcomes and support longer-term financial health in an environment of transparency and objective measurement. Healthy and safe workplace begins with a commitment to offer an environment that promotes a sense of physical and mental well-being, a sense of personal accomplishment that comes from a job well done, and recognition of contribution to the corporate vision. Effective engagement is the result of an ongoing commitment to dialogue, transparency, and the development of strong relationships that are grounded in trust and open communication. Effective engagement seeks to engage people who might not otherwise get involved. It is accessible to people of all abilities and backgrounds and helps to build a sense of ownership and contribution to the community. Again, the idea here that all activity, all communication reflect this guiding principle. Personal leadership deals more internally within the corporation, but is exemplified by agents of positive change who are passionate about growing themselves and those around them to achieve success. The City of Waterloo is committed to supporting its employees to develop and demonstrate the qualities of leadership that enhance effectiveness, efficiency, and the delivery of service excellence. And service excellence itself is defined as the commitment the City of Waterloo will create and reinforce an internal and external culture that is founded on responsiveness and is customer-centric. Embedded in this principle are service standards, performance measurements, and a commitment to continuous improvement.
Thank you. Further commentary. Councillor Hanmer? Councillor?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Margot, you've done a great job in getting the principles, and I think those are great ones for us to all follow. One thing that struck me as I was listening to the values or the principles today, and our whole discussion earlier about volunteerism and the importance of volunteerism. When I think of personal leadership, I think of everyday heroes, and our personal leadership is not just the staff; it's also the volunteers that we rely on. So I'm wondering if we could give some consideration to that one also being employees and volunteers. So recognizing that we do use a lot of volunteers and we expect and nurture and support them to be leaders as well.
Thank you.
Excellent addition. Excellent catch. Wonderful. Seeing nothing further. Oh, Councillor Vasic, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, I also feel like I haven't thanked you. This is awesome. Like, I just feel like how it's come along is really wonderful and beautiful. So thank you, all of you. I just had a couple of suggestions if we might add it in. In the healthy and safe workplaces, where you talk about physical and mental well-being, I wonder if we could add an emotional as well. Is that possible? And then I just reacted a bit to customer-centric. I mean, I understand that there is that kind of relationship where we have a responsibility for customer service and excellence in customer service. But then I also wondered, is it customers? Is it residents? Is it community members? So I don't have a specific suggestion. I just think customer says something, then resident or neighbor, or you know what I mean?
If I may, through you, Mr. Mayor, the discussion around customer was intended to encompass that as a staff, we are each other's customers and how we interact and support cross-departmentally, for example. So that was sort of the thought behind that word. There may be a way to, we can give some thought to specifically mentioning resident or community member and, members of the team, something like that, if that's council's wish.
Cool. I just wanted to put it out there. So, and then the other thing was the pictures. So I had one question about the sustainable on the guiding images. What's the I? I think pictures are important. That's why, because you'll just kind of look quickly and they mean stuff.
Go back. Sustainable. Oh, it's just the idea. These are taken from the UN SDG graphics, and so it's the vision for global sustainability, basically. Now, this was really just a mock-up for council's understanding. I think Shelley will do a much better job at the final product, making it pretty for public consumption. So this was really just used as a starting point.
Can I give one more suggestion then to Shelley? It's just this very normative picture of equity and inclusion that we could maybe, okay, great. Like some people who are different weights, maybe a same-sex couple, maybe a kid who might present as a boy but is wearing female clothes, something, okay. Or other things. Thanks.
Shelley's awesome. She's even better than the United Nations. She'll get these done right. I have no doubt in my mind. Okay. Further commentary, Councillor Bonigar.
Through you, Mayor, I just had a quick question. When I was reading through it, I picked up a number of places where some simpler language could help get the message across with very minor tweaks. Can I connect with you afterwards, Anna Marie? Would that be appropriate? Or Shelley? Okay. I'll come and chat. Thank you.
Wonderful. Seeing no further comments, we really just have to receive this as information. Does anyone want to receive some information? Councillor Bonagor does. Councillor Panmer does. All those in favor? Wonderful. Thank you yet again, team, keeping us on track on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Next up, item B, the high water bill adjustment policy. It's prepared by Todd Chapman, and there's going to be a short presentation by Todd.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Jarowski and members of council. And wait for the presentation to pop up here. Okay, thank you. As mentioned, I'm Todd Chapman, Manager of Programs for City Utilities, and tonight I'm here to provide an overview of the proposed high water bill adjustment policy. The first slide we have up here really summarizes a lot of the reasons why we were led to draft a policy of this nature. Table 1 in the report provides a summary of all of the high water bills that have happened over the past 5 years, and really are categorized by different thresholds. So some that are just double a customer's average consumption, 3 times, 4 times, and 5 times, just to give you a sense of the numbers that we're dealing with. Also mentioned in the report is how involved a particular response can be to just one situation, including many site visits, several conversations. Sometimes these cases escalate to media or senior management and council. So it is something that dominates our world at City Utilities at times. And the frustrating thing for both customers and staff sometimes is, despite our best efforts, we really don't end up finding the cause of a pretty significant spike in consumption for one of our customers. So that also leads to some of the frustration on our customers' behalf. So this, we ended up looking at some other municipalities and really researching if they offer programs or policies to deal with these situations. And also in the report, table 2, I believe, provides a summary of that review. This all led to City Utilities ultimately deciding we wanted to draft our own policy for our own needs, and that is obviously what is proposed along with the report. So getting into a few more details about the proposed policy, staff are recommending a high water bill situation be defined as something that is 3 times a customer's average over the past year. We're recommending that we stick to low density residential only. The proposed adjustment would be based on a rebate of 50% on the high consumption above a customer's normal usage. So we would not be rebating what a customer would normally consume over a 2-month period. Simply, we'd be looking at that consumption well over their average. Staff are recommending a once per decade adjustment, and staff have also reviewed, along with finance, how to fund such a policy, and we're fairly confident that along with the other policy recommendations, that $50,000 would be appropriate to fund such a program. And of course, at the end of every year, we were mentioning that the annual rate report, we would report back on number of applications and what that meant in terms of dollars. So such a policy would certainly have an impact on our customer service abilities. We think first and foremost, this would establish a formal response to these situations, and that would also provide a sense of transparency and consistency in how each situation is dealt with. We would require an application from our customers on this, so this is not something that would be negotiated over the phone. We do have an application form prepared, and it outlines who and what qualifies under what circumstances and so forth. City utilities can administer this program internally with our existing customer service staff, and this type of policy would be available, essentially effective immediately upon council approval. So last slide that I've displayed is just a lot of the different options that staff considered when developing the policy, and all of the options that we considered. Obviously, the highlighted cells are what staff are recommending, and as we looked through all of these options, we essentially tried to balance, what is in line with other municipalities' programs, at the same time, what is administratively do we feel is something we can handle. So those are really the two big considerations when we put together this policy. And I'll leave this slide up and perhaps pass it back to Mayor Jarowski for more discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful, Todd. It seems like once a year we see one story of real hardship and a mystery behind them of a water break or some sort of missing water, and that to hear that it's this number of large ones. It's good to hear that. So now that we have a policy, but open up to questions from council on what we see here. Yeah, Councillor Bodley.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I'm curious if maybe you could give me some. I know we have 416 on average over the last 5 years that meet that 3 times threshold that we're looking at here. Can you give me practically what typically is happening in that scenario where somebody is 3 times above the average?
Yeah. Most often the two culprits are toilets and water softeners, and that's certainly something that we try to troubleshoot with our customers. But as I mentioned, we've also seen numerous cases where even the customer would hire a plumber to come in and they can't find anything. So sometimes they go unexplained.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Jaworski, do we have any, I know we have $50,000 budgeted here within the utility for this, and that we're not looking at increasing rates at this point in time for that purpose. But do we have any data or analysis from any of the other municipalities? For Hamilton's been since 2015. Do we feel like that's appropriate?
Mm-hmm.
I'd hate to see this at some point in time going to all ratepayers to cover the cost of this.
Right. Sure. So through Mayor Jarowski, without naming the municipality, another municipality that is a very similar size to ours has had this program, a similar program, since 2016, I believe. And from what we understand, they usually hit about 25,000 on any given year, or they haven't exceeded 25,000, and they budget approximately 60,000.
Councillor Bonnegar.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I'm just curious about how you chose some of these policy options in the menu. For instance, with the number of invoices eligible, given that a resident might get this bill, they've got 90 days to contact the city and then maybe try and get repairs, try and get the rebate. In that time, they still have the leak, they still have the unexplained thing. So why did you choose 1 instead of 2 invoices being possible?
Okay. Through Mayor Jarowski. So we were looking at how quickly we respond to these situations. In addition, we have taken a cautious approach to try and keep administratively the program rather simple and efficient. So I suppose every one of these elements are up for debate. I think we wanted to keep it simple. It's 1 bill. There's a responsibility to respond to that fairly quickly. And of course, often something that isn't mentioned is that we do help the customer with subsequent reads on their meter shortly after, ensure that any problem that has been identified is fixed. And if it's not, then they continue to troubleshoot that.
Hey, Todd, maybe you can explain to council how we do our high water. When we get a high water read, what's the action we take right after that from a staff level?
Yeah, so when we get a billing section in, there's usually in between 5,000 and 8,000 reads that come back. We quickly sift through those programmatically. We're not manually sifting through each one of those. And when high water bills are detected, we do a quick check read, which is another site visit right away to ensure that the read we got was accurate and valid. That usually eliminates quite a few, but then we end up contacting each customer to the best of our ability, usually through phone or through a door sticker out on site. And then, of course, when most times we would receive a call back, because people are typically concerned about those kind of things, and then we would get on the phone and try and troubleshoot and identify what the source is.
So that would often be happening, like not even due to an invoice, that's happening during a billing period.
Correct,
This
through
could
Mayor
be
Jarowski.
happening, yeah.
So we would get the read typically up to 2 weeks before the bill is even delivered, so we try and contact them as soon as possible.
Yeah, so there is good timely delivery of these, and I think this is a good first step, and then we'll see where we go, because this is a policy obviously that I think we can change at any given time. It's not so hard written in stone that can't be changed. Further questions from council? Seeing none, I'll look for anybody to move it. Councillor Veith, Councillor Henry. All those in favor? All of us, thank you.
Okay.
And thank you very much for bringing this forward. I know that's, like I said, there's a hardship in our community when some people get those pool-sized bills that are mysterious. But I do know for a fact of using our automated metering system and watching. I had a toilet that was leaking once, and I watched the water that was going through it on a day basis, and it was simply enormous. A small leak was an enormous amount of water. So anyway, thank you, Todd. Next up, item C, it's the park amenity upgrades, release of capital funding, a report prepared by Andrea Basler. Andrea's here for any questions, if anybody has any questions for Andrea. Councillor Veith?
I'm really happy to move this motion. I'm so excited for the upgrades that are coming to my ward. So thank you for being here and for all the work on this. So happy to move the motion.
Anything further? Councillor Bodley?
I had a question if I could.
Absolutely. Do you want to second it too while you're at it?
Sure.
Okay.
Excuse me, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Can you maybe give me a little bit of understanding of how the decision-making process goes on, like reading the project priorities by ward? Very interesting. Lots of awesome things that are happening here, but I'm just curious if you could explain maybe the decision-making process for how that goes forward.
Okay. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So the project needs usually come up as we go, things break, other needs come up, and we pile it up in a sheet, and then discussions start about what priorities are, and so the list of things that you will see in this report is that compiled list of priorities, and then we basically pick away at it as we receive the funding.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. All right, Union Street. Union Street East, reconstruction, King to Moore, funding request. A report prepared by Gavin Vermeer. If anybody has any questions, I assume not. You move it? Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bonagor, since your ward. All those in favor? All of us, thank you. Items E and F are relatively on the same topic. So we have Bill 108, More Homes, More Choice Act 2019, Impact on Development Charges, and Bill 108, More Homes, More Choices Act 2019, Impact on Land Use Planning Systems. Two reports prepared by we have Michael, Philippa, Joel, and Janice. Questions from council? You ready? Go ahead.
We have to move an alternative compilation motion, and I'll look for a seconder and then speak to it. Done. First, that Corp 2019-043 and IPPW 219-043 be approved. Two, that council supports the province's goals of improving access to different types of housing, including more affordable housing, but strongly disagrees that Bill 108 in its current form will achieve them. 3, that council is concerned that Bill 108 in its current form could put at risk our city's finances and ability to provide parkland and community facilities, including the East Side Library. 4, that council is opposed to the return of the old OMB rules for planning appeals, as it once again takes the decisions out of the hands of municipal councils, and is concerned that the new timelines for planning decisions will make it difficult to adequately engage the public and resolve issues collaboratively and avoid a lengthy and costly appeals process. 5, that council requests that the province extend the deadline for comments on Bill 108 from June 1st to September 30th and make any proposed regulations associated with Bill 108 available well in advance of the new deadline to allow municipalities adequate time for comment. And 6, that Corp 2019-043 and IPPW 2019-043, along with any additional comments may be deemed appropriate by the city's chief financial officer and treasurer, the city planner, and or the city solicitor be forwarded to the province of Ontario as the city of Waterloo's preliminary comments in relation to Bill 108.
Wonderfully concise. Please go ahead.
Yes, in the last term of council, we had Brian Burke able to do that in a real quick media voice. I do not have that. But what is real quick is the way that the province is drastically reshaping the landscape around how municipalities operate, how municipalities have opportunities to engage the public and consider what is best for their community, and ensure that along the way that growth does indeed pay for growth. That is not the direction that many of the elements of Bill 108 takes, and in fact, some of their efforts to speed up timelines will inevitably lead to longer, more costly appeals as we have to duke it out through lawyers and expensive hired outside planners, rather than do it as the City of Waterloo has always tried to do it, which is work collaboratively to understand what the issues are and to really work for what the best outcome possible is and have it take the time that it needs to take to get it right. And we do that fairly efficiently and fairly effectively, but these are efforts to tie our hands behind our back. And the other concerning thing, and this is with the finance chair hat on, is the changes to how growth pays or doesn't pay, in this case, for growth. We don't know a lot about what the new regime will look like, but what we can expect is that the new proposed regime here would be a lot worse for building strong communities in Waterloo as we continue to grow. Rather than allowing council with the community to be able to plan for parks and for recreation and for libraries and all of the other things that make living in a city great, it would put those priorities in competition with each other for limited pools of funds. And that is a problem that has not been acknowledged or identified by the provincial government and needs to be highlighted and addressed. So I built this new recommendation on the backs of a couple of things. One, the very detailed staff reports here in identifying specific concerns here in Waterloo, projects that we have long planned for but are not funded if we're no longer able to collect those funds. And 2, from resolutions put together, Mayor, from the large Urban Mayors Caucus that met with the minister last week, and they put out, I think, some very good recommendations. The good news is, today the province walked back on at least in-year funding changes, mostly affecting the region. So it is possible for highlighting these issues and the perhaps unintended consequences, if I think charitably about the intent behind these, to be reconsidered and walk back before they do severe damage to the future communities that we all try to build together.
Councillor Bonnegar, do you have any comments since you're a seconder, or are you okay? Out of courtesy, no obligation.
No, I fully second Councillor Henry's comments there, and I want to thank staff for putting together such really intricate background information for us so that we can more fully understand, even though the regulations aren't out, so there are not many exact details to be speaking to, but being able to have such a strong idea of the potential implications puts us in a good position to make a recommendation like this. But also, I'm a little concerned. I don't want to see the return of the OMB. So I really think that I hope that the province listens to us and to the many voices that are asking for this process to slow down and for us to take a measured approach. So thank you for your help in us.
Further commentary, actual questions for staff? Councillor Bodley?
further commentary, if I can, through your Mayor Jaworski. Again, just thank you, Jeff, for the revised recommendation here. I fully support it. I want to highlight the second point in there, that we definitely support the goal of improving access to different types of housing. That's exceptionally important. We all agree with that. It's just that we dispute some of the finer points within Bill 108 that maybe are not even fully released yet. And one of the things that I just want to point out is the idea of prioritizing certain types of infrastructure over other types of infrastructure in terms of city building is really problematic to me. And even the commentary of calling certain things, quote, soft services does a really strong disservice to what makes our city great and other cities great. Parks, libraries, outdoor rec, indoor rec, these are not arbitrary things. These are things that make the city what it is. And so if we're not asking developers who are coming forward to contribute to the growth that they're bringing to our city to help grow these services for all of our community, then that means we are going to have to increase taxes on the rest of the community to fund that difference. And I don't think members of our community would be very happy with that. And so I just wanted to point that out and, again, appreciate the resolution there, Jeff. Thank you.
Now, just to, I think, put a finer point on, if you look out here to our council chambers, yet again, we're filled tonight, and it's for, I suspect, the informal public meeting which we're having on Westmount Road. And if you look at the new timelines that we're facing, if Bill 108 goes through, it would be surprising. This could be an historic night. This could be our last ever informal public meeting, a chance for everybody to have a quick peek at the plans that are going through, because there will not be time for it in the new rules. And that would be very sad. The informal public meeting is something the City of Waterloo does so that everybody can have an earlier look at the applications, at what's going through, see what's going on in their community and their neighborhood. And there probably would not be time for it with the new rules that are going through. So we have a motion on the table. I see no further questions. I'll call the question. All those in favor? It's all of us. Thank you. And thank you to the teams for, yet again, putting in a great rush on a commentary for this bill of the province. Moving forward to item G. Zoning bylaw amendment Z1902 to remove the holding symbol from 229, 231, 235, 239, 249 Albert Street for 239 Albert Inc. And it's a report that was prepared by Dominic Simpson. There is one delegation, Megan Garrity from GSP. And we'll hear the delegation.
Public. My name is Megan Garrity. I'm a planner at GSP Group. I'm here this evening on behalf of the applicant. Also here with me is the owner, Drazen Prika, Hugh Hendy, also from GSP Group, Alex Shreenard from PGDS, one of the architects, and Simona Gorchevic, also from PGDS. As you know, the application was before you earlier this year in April on the 29th, but was deferred to allow our team the opportunity to provide council with additional clarification surrounding some zoning compliance information. GSP Group as well as PG Design Studios provided letters to council through staff to further explain our position on the zoning compliance question. Those letters are appended to your package this evening. We haven't received any comments from council since that point, but we hope that the responses were sufficient in order to respond to those clarification questions. As outlined in the staff report, all applicable requirements of the H holding symbol removal application have been met, including verification of capacity for servicing as well as transportation, and verification of compliance with the official plan and the regional official plan and urban design guidelines. Ultimately, we agree with the conclusions of the staff report this evening, but just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to speak, and we're all available should you have any further questions about the application.
Thank you, Megan. Questions of the delegate? Councillor Vasic.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. It's less of a question and more just thinking about this affordable housing and having a diverse supply of housing options, which makes me wonder what kind of housing supply do we want? So this is more of I understand what we're being asked to vote on tonight, and this is more of a commentary about how do we create diverse housing options, what kind of housing supply are we looking for, and what do the people who are going to be living in these houses, what are they looking for? And so I just wanted to make the comment that I highly doubt that students are looking for a dining room, and I'd really love if students and other people in other dwellings in the community were consulted, and maybe they were, but in a more robust way possibly, to find out what are they really looking for in these housing units. And if you have consulted with students and they're looking for a formal dining room in their units, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Thanks.
Sure. To respond through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware of any formal consultation that was done with any students, but I do know that Preka Group has a diverse portfolio of various developments, specifically in the Northdale area, but also outside the Northdale area. And they've provided us with all the input that we've got to go on these applications in terms of what kind of market demands that they see. So I don't know if there is anything I can point to specifically, but clearly they wouldn't do it, I don't think, unless there was a demand for it. But potentially also there's been some discussion for the Northdale area to be transitionary from not just for students, but also maybe for young professionals who might want that kind of space in those types of units as well.
Councillor Bonagor?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I'm not entirely sure if you can answer me on this one, Megan, but thank you for the additional information. It was really helpful. To echo your question regarding dining rooms, I understand from the city's rules, it sounds to me, if I'm reading them correctly, if something is labelled a dining room, it is therefore not a bedroom.
Yep.
Who is responsible for checking that this building is not overpopulated by students who are maybe sharing their apartment and using that second room, which is almost as big as the bedrooms, as a second bedroom? Like, who is responsible for making sure that there's not subletting going on and that the building has more residents than perhaps fire code allows and that kind of thing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's addressed in Alex's letter in saying that on the site plan, or through the site plan process in the agreement, there's language that specifically speaks to not converting those spaces. Now, obviously, you're talking about real life situations in which someone goes in. I'm not familiar with what happens once people are occupying the space. Perhaps someone in staff might be able to answer that question better in terms of later on. I know through the condo process, there are further requirements and additional agreements that go through. This isn't going through condo at this time, but maybe someone else could provide some additional clarity to that question.
Oh. Was it Joel or Dominic or? Dominic, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Yes, so in the planning division, we do all we can to ensure that what is a bedroom stays as a bedroom, what is not a bedroom stays as not a bedroom. But beyond that, I think our only resources would be through municipal enforcement. If they get word that there are people inhabiting those spaces, that they would step in and take action. Beyond that, I think it's out of our control and then becomes a police operation or issue to solve.
Mr. Rapp.
Certainly, in addition to what Dominic mentioned, is that we can structure condominium agreements, we can structure zoning bylaws, but we have no legal way to gain access to the units themselves. So there is a reliance ultimately. Same with a single detached structure as with an apartment building, that you are hopeful that everybody is acting and behaving within the law or the condominium agreements and all those things. But as noted, we do not have legal access to the units themselves. If there was a fire or something that occurred, then I know fire would take a look at it and see what had occurred, and if there was another unit, another kitchen facility, things like that that might occur in the community, then we would be apprised of it. But unless there was an incident, we have no legal way of getting into the units themselves.
Okay. Thank you. Further questions of the delegate? Councillor Henry.
Thank you very much, Mayor Jaworski, and I'm glad new councillors are asking questions about the extent to which our legal abilities to enforce the regime extend into these cases. Megan, you referenced Alex's letter, and if he'd like to come up, he could, but I'm happy to just ask through you. You've mentioned that his letter indicates he's advised his client, quote, that deviations from the design intent are contrary to zoning regulations. In your experience, is it common for professional architects, professional planners in these cases to need to advise their clients of these things? Is this a common occurrence on a regular basis for a wide swath of your clients that this is something that they need to do?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure that the language in Alex's letter specifically says that he's advised his client, although it could. But definitely I do recall it saying that staff have required it through the site plan process, that it would be part of the agreement. Is there a section of the letter that specifically?
Page 2.
Sure.
4th line.
Right. I think in this context, they were advising their clients that this was a requirement of the agreement, which isn't typical. I think it's kind of a new thing that was required for the agreements. I think pre-group is well aware of the situation. There have been several other discussions and other applications regarding bedrooms.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Megan.
Thank you. Gonna grab my woodworking.
Next up is for any questions of staff on this. Seeing no questions of, go ahead, Councillor Bonnegar.
I'm going to put on my new councillor hat right now.
Please do.
Some of the questions that we've raised and the issues that we've discussed make me nervous about voting for this recommendation. If this were to be turned down at this point, what does that mean for the city? What does that open us up? Does it open us up to anything? Is there anything that I should be aware of on that front, should we say no?
And maybe it might be good, I see Joel has his hand up, to review what we're actually doing here today with respect to the holding symbol. So, please.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, that's exactly what I was going to speak to. The matter before council this evening is to remove a holding provision, which is a technical matter. The holding provision is applied typically to require services or something to be done, a study, prior to development proceeding. So before council is a request to lift holding. Holding symbols were applied to the majority of properties within Northdale, requiring a number of matters to be completed. As indicated in the staff report prepared by Dominic, those technical matters have been completed. So for council's perspective, the matter is, are you satisfied that those issues are complete? And if you are, then you should ultimately approve the removal of the holding symbol. If council were to deny the requirement, the applicant would have the right to appeal to the local planning appeals tribunal, and the matter would then proceed towards those legal proceedings.
Further questions or comments? Anybody want to move anything?
I'll be consistent with my past practice of, at least on this side, making sure we're following our rules and procedure to the letter and intent of their design, and move the motion with a comment.
Okay, moved with a comment, seconded by Councillor Hammer. Sorry, next time.
I certainly don't move this with enthusiasm. For new members of council, there was this issue had come to a head a number of years ago. The language that we now have and definitions we now have around what is and is not a bedroom arose from situations that are eerily familiar here tonight. So I can only say that what the regime we have is staff's best answer under the law for us to be able to deal with this. And I think that says something in and of itself for what we get out of it. I'm all for flexible spaces. I'm all for considering requests for additional density in various locations because we have provisions for that. Those ought to come through the current Section 37 process because that's how this community was planned for. I trust, should that be what ultimately results in this development, is that as these go through to building permit stage, that these are indeed draft designs, and what actually gets constructed is properly constructed and used to comply with the city's zoning bylaw and the Northdale plan.
Thank you. Any further commentary? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Dominic, for reviewing it again. Next up is item H, one that Councillor Freeman will depart for. Exemption pursuant to 3410.0.0.2 for 262 to 280 Albert Street. Report prepared by John Voss, who's with us here now. For questions. Seeing little enthusiasm for questions. Is anybody enthused about the recommendation? Moved with a comment from Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor Bodley. Go ahead.
I think this is as intended. We'd scoped our exemptions to allow us some oversight over what was coming. The only reason this is coming is because most of the amendments are really because our newly approved zoning bylaw has not yet been fully adopted through appeals, and the ones that remain are combined, mean it would come through a zoning bylaw amendment process rather than to committee of adjustment where it could have proceeded quickly. I would only say, since this will come to an informal public meeting, I will refrain from further detailed comment because we will have other opportunities for that. I'd simply observe at this time ahead of that meeting that the double driveway on Hickory has, maybe these are our own rules, appears to be very, very wide turning radiuses, and doubled up means there's a long stretch where there appears to be some conflict with pedestrians on our green street. So I'd ask us to make sure that we're taking a look at that as this comes through the process.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'll call it. All those in favor? All of us, thank you. Welcome back, Councillor Freeman. Item I is the Waterloo Award Nomination Review Committee, a report prepared by Julie Scott, and we really have to fill in the blank that the council appoint Councillor Blank to the Waterloo Award Nomination Review Committee for 2019. I'll look for volunteers. Councillor Hanmer would like to volunteer. Tell us why.
I would really like to volunteer for this one because I think it is a very important, another opportunity for us to recognize outstanding leaders within our community.
And do you have experience in this area?
I certainly have a little bit of experience. I was very fortunate in nominating the recipient of the award 3 years ago, Robert Henning, who started the Waterloo Girls Minor Hockey, and we are now 17 years strong because of Robert's vision.
Wonderful. Anybody else looking to volunteer against Councillor Hanmer? Seeing none, somebody would like to move it perhaps? Councillor Bonagor, Councillor Vasic. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. Thank you. Item 11. Wow. Where does the time go? This is an informal public meeting to consider item 11A, zone change application Z1903 and official amendment number 26, Kilm Apartment REIT, 50 Westmount Road North, 9 to 15 Dietz Ave North, and 192 to 216 Herb Street West. There will be no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application, and a staff report will be considered by Council during a formal public meeting at a future time. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands and anyone who signs the registry will receive notice of the formal public meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate registry located on the desk at the rear of council chambers. If there's more than one registry, please ensure you're signing the appropriate one. The planner, Natalie Hardacre, will now provide a brief overview of the application. Welcome, Natalie.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, members of the public and staff. As noted, this is an informal public meeting relating to 50 Westmount Road, 9 and 15 Dietz Avenue North, and 192 to 218 Herb Street West. The site is shown here in red. It is approximately 7.2 hectares in size, and it's bounded on 4 sides by streets. So Herb Street West is located here, Westmount Road to the west, Father David Bauer north, and then Dietz Avenue North runs along this portion of the property in this location. Surrounding land uses include a gas station and the paramedic services owned by the region up in this location north of Father David Bauer Drive, as well as Waterloo Park. To the east is the Luther Village, which we're all very much aware of, and low-density residential along Dietz in this location and in this location, as well as a 9-story apartment building off of Sunshine Avenue, and that's accessible from Beverly. As well as to the south, residential, so that includes anywhere from low, medium to medium-high density residential in this location, and then high density residential to the west, as well as a commercial office. The site is made up of 3 different parts. So 50 Westmount Road is shown in red here, or purple, I guess, which make the majority of that is built up with what we know as the Westmount Plaza. So there's offices, including Sun Life, retail, restaurants, and a food store. The property is also made up of 192 and 218 Herb Street West, which are 9 residential detached dwellings that front onto Herb Street, and 9 and 15 Dietz Avenue North, which are 2 3-story apartment buildings that front onto Dietz. One thing to note is that the grades, as most of you I'm sure are aware, are significantly varied in this location. So the difference in grade from the buildings that are fronting Herb Street are approximately 10 meters higher than the balance of the lands on 50 Westmount Road. The city's official plan designates the site mixed-use community commercial, which is shown in red here. The site is actually the black dotted line here. It's also designated, the blue area here is mixed-use medium-high density residential designation. The entire site is designated major node. A portion of the property, being the Westmount Plaza property, with the 50 Westmount Road, is high density, which permits up to 81 meters in height in built form. And the balance of the land, so along Herb and Dietz Avenue, contemplates building heights of 40 meters or no greater than 40 meters in height and medium-high density development. Special policy area applies to the lands, which recognizes flood hazard. It's shown here in the gray, so it's the northern half of the property. As well, Herb and Westmount are both regional roads, while Father David Bauer Drive and Dietz Avenue are city roads. So in this instance, as you're aware, because our new zoning bylaw, which was approved by council in September, is under appeal, we do need to look at both zoning bylaws, what we refer to as the old zoning bylaw 1108 and the new zoning bylaw 2018-050. So in zoning bylaw 1108, the property is zoned commercial 5, so C525, which is again the larger 50 Westmount Road portion, multiple residence 12 along Herb, and MR 6 along Dietz.
And just for clarity, can you explain what the 12, 25, and 6 is for everyone?
Absolutely. That's stories, maximum permitted stories. So 25 stories, 12 stories, and 6 stories in the old zoning bylaw. In the new zoning bylaw, the property is zoned mixed-use community commercial, so C181, and the 81 represents meters in height, and that is a maximum permitted height. So anything can be built less than, but not more than 81 meters in height. Mixed-use community commercial along Herb Street, and that's in this location here, that's red, C140, and then residential mixed-use RMU 40, and again, 40 meters would be the maximum permitted height in this yellow location here. So the developer intends to redevelop the site, and I'm calling the site as the global property, and has therefore requested amendments to the official plan and our city's zoning bylaw. The following shows the development proposal here, and I am aware that the applicant and the developer are both here to speak to this in detail, so I'm going to do this at a high level, but of course if council has specific questions, I'm more than happy to answer at that time. But I also know that the developer and the consultant are here to provide much more detail. So overall, the majority of the plaza is proposed to be maintained, including the Sun Life building. Where we know the Michaels to be currently, it is proposed to be replaced with a 1-story retail and 5-story commercial structure, which will also include a 3-story parking structure. Proposed buildings include a residential 11-story apartment building up along Dietz Avenue at the close to Luther Village. This building design is stepped with 4 stories along the north property boundary that is shared with Luther Village, but 11 stories by the time you're headed further south down Dietz. Building B, which is this structure here, mixed-use podium and 2 towers, and the towers range from 11 stories in height at the east portion of the building and 19 stories. Building C is this structure here, which constitutes a mixed-use podium as well with 2 residential towers. The heights of those are 23 stories and 25 stories. Another mixed-use podium down along Westmount Road, which would be 22 stories in height. Some quick statistics include that the density proposed for the entirety of the site is 200 bedrooms per hectare. Residential units would be 1,014, which would provide a total of 1,439 bedrooms. The commercial floor area, new commercial floor area, so of course many of it would be maintained from the existing, but new commercial floor area would be 6,000, just over 6,000 square meters, and the total parking provided on the site if this proposal were to be developed is 1,526 spaces. The 2 renderings shown here, the first one on the left is a view looking south, and then the photo on the right shows a view from Dietz looking west. Part of the proposal is to include a Wunurf street, which is a shared street down the center that would provide access from Westmount Road all the way to Dietz. So there is an existing driveway there now in the plaza, and they're proposing to relocate it slightly to the south. And of course provide enhancements in the way of design and public art and pedestrian realm. So the ask, they've come in with 2 requests. One is an official plan amendment and one is a zone change. So the official plan amendment, ultimately what they're requesting is that the land use designation and height and density permissions for the site as a whole be mixed use community commercial and high density with a maximum height of 81 meters for the whole of the property. So this would involve a change in the land use designations for the lands at the corner of Herb and Dietz, so specifically 192 to 202 Herb and 9 and 15 Dietz, from mixed-use medium-density residential to mixed-use community commercial. This would also involve a change to the height and density permissions for all the lands fronting Herb Street and Dietz Avenue from medium-high density, which contemplates up to and no greater than 40 meters, to high density, which contemplates up to 81 meters. So also they are requesting the creation of a site-specific provision area for the property, which would permit residential units at grade along Herb Street and Dietz Avenue. It would limit the building height abutting Dietz to 40 meters. And the mixed-use community commercial designation requires a minimum amount of gross leasable area devoted to primary uses. Although overall this site is well below the minimum, they are increasing it and getting it closer to the minimum. It's still below. So part of their request is to provide a policy that would recognize the minimum. Zoning bylaw amendment that they're seeking is to, again, it's ultimately to reflect the official plan ask, which is to maintain the C1-81 zone, which is our mixed-use community commercial zone, which implements the land use designation over the entirety of the site. So it would effectively change a portion of the site from C140 to C181, and at the corner of Herb and Dietz, it's proposing to change the zone from RMU 40 to C181. The site-specific regulations that they're requesting is to limit the maximum height along Dietz Avenue, a parking reduction from what would be required at 2,362 spaces to 1,526 spaces. They are seeking to permit structured parking within the first story, permit residential units at grade. And this is, they're seeking that request to recognize some of the grading challenges on the property, and to reduce the street line setback in two locations. One is for an underground parking structure along Herb Street. They are seeking 0.6 meter setback, whereas 5 meters is required. The second is at the corner of Herb and Dietz. The building in that location is 3.6 meters from the property line, and the requirement is 5. In addition, as the applicant is seeking height increase from 40 meters to 81 meters on a portion of the property, this application will be evaluated against the bonusing policies in the official plan and Section 37 of the Planning Act. If it is deemed appropriate that any height is acceptable in this location, and if council feels that it is something that they could support, then community benefits shall be provided in exchange for the additional height. Again, based on the policies of the official plan and of Section 37 of the Planning Act. So the following information was submitted in support of the development. Currently, all of this information is being reviewed by staff and by outside agencies. And this information is all available to the public on the city's zone change webpage, should anyone be interested in reviewing any of these documents. So the next steps is for staff to review the submitted documents and studies as previously shown, to review the requested amendments, including the site-specific policies and regulations that have been requested, and to review the development proposal as a whole, to review building height and massing, proposed uses, internal streets, pedestrian connectivity, public spaces, parking, and sustainability. We want to ensure that this is going to be a sustainable development should it be approved, and we intend to have some conversations with the applicant in that regard. Of course, we are continuing and will continue to accept public input and agency comments through the process, and eventually a staff report will be prepared and it will come back to council for a formal public meeting with recommendations. So that concludes my presentations. If there's any questions, of course, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Natalie. You covered a lot of ground. I do have a question on slide 9. It's a bit counterintuitive to me. It looks like the request is to have the entire property zoned for 81 meters, but then midway through it says maximum height along Dietz 40 meters to actually bring it back down again. Am I reading that correct?
Yes, the request is to provide one consolidated designation and one consolidated zone on the property. However, through the site-specific regulations, they are requesting, the applicant is requesting that the maximum height along Dietz be limited to 40 meters.
And that is what it is today?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Questions from council? Councilor Bonagor?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I'm just hoping you can help us kind of situate this development in the surrounding neighbourhood. So when we're looking at a lot of the towers, they're largely along Erb going on to Dietz. Urban Dietz are pretty much the residential streets that are around this development, but I understand that Erb has been set as a corridor, one of our major development corridors. So can you please remind us of the zoning, if you know it offhand, on the other side of Erb? Like, what could this be surrounded by? Currently, there's a mix of like low houses and some mid-rise apartments, I understand, but can you give me an idea of what that's zoned for?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bonagor, it's a bit mixed. When looking at the zoning bylaw, and I've pulled it up here, specifically when looking at our new zoning bylaw, so 2018-050, the red represents commercial, the purple represents other commercial or business, and then this yellow area here represents more medium residential. So along there, it's RMU 40, so it permits heights of approximately 40 meters or less than 40 meters. In this area here, so further south, in behind the lots that front onto Erb is all low density residential. And then also to the east, so further east past the 9-story apartment building off of Beverly, again, in behind is low density residential. Across Westmount to the west is high density residential. So it really is mixed, high to the west, medium along that corridor. In some cases, the maximum height permissions are 40 meters. In some cases, they're 20 meters. And then in behind is the low density residential.
Okay. Further questions? Councillor Vasek?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thanks for that presentation. I'm just curious, at what point in the process does the conversation about community benefits start happening, and what they will be, and when they will happen?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Vasek. It's an ongoing conversation, usually through the whole process, but it is a two-step conversation. And the first is to determine whether or not this is an appropriate location to warrant an increase in height, and if so, to what degree. So that's usually the first step. And then if the answer is yes, that it is warranted or that there's justification to support the increase in height, then there needs to be a conversation of what community benefit or what package of community benefits is appropriate to provide in exchange for the height. Now, our staff are also going through guidelines right now to modify that process, which council has seen. So there's also appraisal that will be done to determine the value that additional height might generate.
I'm not convinced this council has seen that. Have we? Who has a better memory? I'm not convinced that we've seen it, but maybe that's a report that can go to new members of council. Further questions? Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, and certainly there's a lot to ask on this, and I'll save most of it for the applicant, as I think some others will. There's been some press attention about some existing low-rise apartments, and because they're older, tend to have more affordable rents along Dietz Avenue. I was wondering if staff had either from the applicant or through other means, had an idea of whether those existing apartments meet the definition in our official plan of affordable. I know everybody has different definitions of affordable housing. Ours is, I think, generally 10% below AMR and yada, yada, yada. I'm wondering if we know whether that's the case. And if so, if that triggers any policies that we currently have in place at the city in terms of how we consider these developments.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Henry. I am not aware as to whether or not these buildings constitute within the definition of affordable. However, I know that staff are continuing to encourage and recommend that affordable units be incorporated within developments, and this is no different from one that we might request or encourage that being considered in the design of this development.
Yeah, certainly the potential Section 37 community benefits piece feels like a vehicle we don't often have, should they be proven relevant to consider looking at some of those things. I know Councillor Vasek was when the conversation starts, and staff have a test, but in terms of starting to think through what interest there would be should the test be met, I think there's a resoundingly obvious answer from many members of council at this point, subject to comment, that we'd hear through this process, that affordability is of interest wherever we can find it and preserve it.
Thank you. Any further questions of staff? One more. Councillor Bodley, go ahead.
Thank you, through Mayor Jaworski. Echoing Councillor Henry's comments there, but question, with the parking spaces, the numbers, sorry, excuse me, you had the current zoning requirement would be 2,362 spaces, and the proposal is for 1,526. How does that that's under the old zoning bylaw, if I'm reading that correctly. What would the requirement be under the new zoning bylaw? Do we know?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bodley, my understanding is that is a requirement of the new zoning bylaw. I can double check, but ultimately, I'm not sure of what the numbers would be with the old versus the new and how that would compare. I do know in many cases in our new zoning bylaw, we have reduced some of the parking rates. So I suspect that the new zoning would be lower than the old, but as far as the specifics, that's not something I have for you right now, but it's something I could get back to you if that's of interest.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you, Council, for only asking questions of clarification. I forgot to mention that. I will now ask green registered delegations to come forward, of which we have 4 on my list. And the first up is Andrew Kent and Carrie Curtis of Killam Apartment REIT. Oh, for
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, members of the public, staff. First, I want to commend you all on the community you've built, on the municipality success as of late, specifically, and you've built a wonderful community with prosperity and diversity, and that's commendable. My name's Andrew Kent. I represent Killam Apartments. And I'm going to be very brief tonight because I suspect there's members of the public, and it's more important that you hear from them tonight than from me. But I did want to go briefly through who Killam is. Our consultants team is here tonight, and they're going to walk through the proposal itself. But I did just want to spend a few minutes introducing Killam and who we are and what we hope to bring to the city. I mentioned prosperity and diversity initially because we believe as a company that to truly prosper, cities require good quality rental housing, and that's what we provide right across the country. So I'm just going to go here to the first one. So we are based in Halifax, but Carrie is our local representation, our local project manager. She's local. Her office is in Westmount Centre in the building. In fact, in the next few months, we're moving our entire regional operation, which will cover all of Southern Ontario, to Waterloo, again as a testament to our commitment to the city and where we believe it's headed. Killam has approximately $2.7 billion worth of properties across the country, approximately 16,000 residential apartments. We've got about 20 years experience in residential development. And again, our business is to develop good quality rental housing. We don't develop condos. We develop mixed-use projects and provide rental housing to seniors, to young professionals, to middle-income, working-class folks. I did want to speak just again briefly to our core values, and this is part of what we hope to bring to Waterloo. It's building community, and that's both within the building, but also the communities in which we operate. It's doing the right thing, and I hope to speak to some of those items that we do. And we try and build good quality buildings. Our buildings are nice to look at. They contribute to community. And Carrie's going to walk through a couple of our projects that we've completed recently. And I guess the end is strong customer relationships, and that speaks to our customers who are our tenants, who are our residential tenants, our renters, as well as our commercial tenants. And obviously, Sun Life is an important commercial tenant on this site. We had a great meeting with them today. We've got more meetings lined up tomorrow, and they're an important partner on this site that will continue to work together to ensure that they have the space they need to flourish and grow. So from a ESG or an environmental social governance perspective, we take our core values and we try to apply them as best we can in the projects that we undertake. A few items of note. We support local charities, including shelter and funds, as well as employee time to make sure people are housed. In 2018, we had more than 600 subsidized rental units throughout our portfolio, which we used we utilized a number of partnerships, both provincially and local government partnerships, to make those happen. Every year we donate 6 furnished suites to local hospitals so that folks that are coming from away have a place to stay so that they can be with their family. We have a tenant relief program for folks who are struggling to pay their rent on, stuff happens, so we have a program for those folks. We offer time for employees to volunteer in the community, and I can say most volunteers take us up on that and contribute back to the community. And I think because of that and because of our philosophy and what we bring to the communities we operate, we're often voted as a top employer in Canada. And the last point I would just say is we do have a commitment to sustainability, and certainly whatever we build on this site will have a number of key components, including solar energy, including water-saving fixtures, including good quality tested envelope, so it's efficient, it doesn't leak, it stays warm, it stays cool, electric car charging stations, state-of-the-art building security and entry systems. So certainly, again, that's a part of what we do. And again, I think our reputation can stand on its own in terms of what we deliver and what our tenants say about us. Our tenants are generally happy with the services we provide, and when we compare ourselves to national averages and our competitors who have satisfaction in the 75% range, we're well above that, and we take great pride in that, as well as folks who recommend us to their friends and are satisfied with both their apartment, but also our management of those apartments. So with that, thank you again. Thank you all. Thank you, members of the community, for coming out. And I'll hand you off to Carrie. Sure. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Carrie Curtis. I've recently joined Killam over the last 2 months. I spent 21 years in consulting engineering in this municipality and have left consulting to join Killam. I worked on Killam's first project in Cambridge about 7 years ago and got to know them and have had nothing but great experiences, and has been a great transition for me. So thought I would walk you through some of the projects just to give a bit of an idea of what we do at Killam and the type of buildings that we build. So this building is, if anybody's been to Halifax and they've seen the Alexander Keys building and are aware of the brewery district, this is the Alexander, and it's attached to the Alexander Keys building, and is a great building. It has 248 units, and it has some restaurants and market and so forth on the lower levels. The next one is the Killick, which is a recent acquisition in Dartmouth, which is also in the Halifax general area. But you can see just the general quality, the views, the type of quality that's in our buildings. This is a recent building that was just occupied starting on Saturday, Frontier, and it's in Gloucester. It's very similar to the Westmount Place project. It's 5 towers, very similar. There'll be a public park, and it's also an infill redevelopment project. Saginaw Parkway is the one that I had initially worked on. There's 2 buildings on this site, and amazing resident community. I was there a few weeks ago, and our resident manager knew every resident by name, said hello to everybody as they walked in the building. It was a lovely community, and they have their coffee time, and it was quite impressive, actually. So that's Saginaw. The next one is Weber Scott Pearl, which we're going to be working through in Kitchener over the next year or so as well. That one has approval in principle in Kitchener, and so we're working through the details on that one to get site plan approval. And this is a nice one in Charlottetown along the waterfront. And another one that we're doing in Mississauga, which is Silver Spear, which is another infill development along Dixie, which again was underutilized and created a lovely building that we'll be building this summer. And that's it. If there's questions for us.
Great, thank you. Questions from council for our friends? And if you don't, well, I have one out of the gate. One of the features that we saw in Natalie's presentation was a new street off Dietz, a Woonerf, which is generally in my view, a street that's oriented towards pedestrians or for pedestrians, but cars can creep along it. So I just wanted to see what your intentions were for that street there. Is that sort of a main entry point, or is that sort of like, exceptional deliveries that are coming to the what I heard was ground floor commercial? Maybe you could talk a bit about your vision for that.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So what we picture there is certainly more of an urban environment than what exists on the current site. And that one, or for that street, we see lined with commercial and residential lobbies. And so that would become essentially a corridor of public space in that pedestrians own it. There's street furniture, there's playground equipment, there's significant planting, there is bike racks, there is a pedestrian experience or a park-like atmosphere that allows cars to traverse through the site. And the folks that are in those spaces, maybe they're Sun Life employees coming out for lunch, maybe they're not neighbors coming to shop in the center, but those folks have the opportunity to utilize the commercial that faces that internal street, and also utilize that internal space as public space.
Intention would be that'd be a very low volume street, car volume street.
I suppose it would be low speed, right? It would be low speed because it would be shared with other users, but there are accesses that would utilize that, access to both the new buildings as well as the existing buildings that would utilize that street. I guess the other component of that, though, is one of the things I mentioned there was building community, and we do a number of events at every single one of our buildings throughout the year, and I don't see this being any different in that we have a food truck festival, or we have a family day, or we see that space as being activated both by the city and community groups that wish to use it, but also by ourselves and our commercial tenants.
Councillor Bonagor has questions.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you for bringing this to us so we can get a first look at your plans. I'm interested, I don't know, I know I'm not meant to ask questions that would go for the issue opinions, but I'm going to be asking some questions about your design process. So the bulk of the block, as it stands, is zoned for 80 metres, but the part that fronts Herb is really in the zoning bylaw. It's for 40 metres in order to kind of have a transition to the urban, to the residential neighbourhoods. Can you lead me through your design and your thinking as to why you've requested such height on Herb when the zoning bylaw really indicates that the city is hoping for the height to be set back from Herb?
Right. So initially when we looked at the site, we thought, okay, well, there's an existing zoning bylaw in place, and there is, and the new zoning bylaw coming into effect, and both allow significant height on the mall site, right? And we thought, okay, well, let's see what that looks like if we built that out. And so there's a significant amount of density or height that we could have built down below. I think it worked out to about 10 towers. And we all sat around and said, well, first of all, that would destroy the mall, and we would lose those services, which are important to folks. And then the second component was, well, what is actually the best design here? What is the best design? And the best design for our perspective was to put the residential tenants onto Herb and to have residential residential units at grade along Herb to blend in with the community. And so what that resulted was is instead of building as of right buildings on the mall site, it required us to go through this process, which we're happy to do because, again, we believe it's the right solution for the site. We believe the right solution for the site is to not interrupt with the existing services that are in the mall, and to have the density, the residential density, focused on Herb and closer to the existing residential community. The rationale around the height becomes partly it's the allowable density that we could have built on the lower mall site and utilizing that potential on Herb. And so if we take the potential density that was down below and we move it to Herb, we look for value, we look to transfer that value. And so that's what initiates that height.
When you were going through the planning process, did you look at maybe having 40 metres kind of up the hill on Herb and then 80 down the hill so that it was a little more staggered? Was that something that you considered?
Yep, we did. We did. Part of it is that lower portion is the floodplain as well. So getting out of the floodplain area is important. And also, I guess, one thing I didn't mention was when we look at the neighboring properties, there are existing tall buildings, and so to have step down or transition from those buildings back into the site and back to the neighbors, we think is a good design solution. I think having Trevor and our design team speak to those items is probably appropriate, but that's my take.
I will save my next question for Trevor then. Finally, can you give me some idea of what kind of community engagement or information sessions that you have planned? Because you're going to be getting a lot of interested people wanting to offer their input.
Yes, that never happens with development. Yeah, we're used to that. We expect that. We encourage that. We think at the end of the day it'll make our development better to talk to folks and to hear what they know their community much better than we do, and they can tell us about things that we don't know about. So we are planning to do that. I will let Trevor speak to the details on what that'll entail. But we will see the community again in other settings before we come back to you with the formal meeting.
Thank you for the questions. Councillor Vasic, please.
Through you, Mayor, thanks. It's similar to Councillor Bonagor's, and also, yeah, thank you for the presentation, which is the public engagement. So I'm just curious, not just around like the neighboring community, but what kind does public consultation also look like with people who could or would live there? You listed a whole number of potential kind of stakeholder groups. And so to know what this is similar to my question before that I asked less kindly, so I'm trying to ask you.
No, I get it.
Which is, middle income, working class, senior people.
Yeah.
How do you intend to engage potential customers?
Yeah, so what we do, and we probably don't do that as effectively as we could, so I take your point. What we typically do in a market like this where we haven't built in the city of Waterloo before is we'll undertake a market study. And so the market study will look at our competition, but it'll also look at what people are looking for, so market demand essentially. And there's a number of companies that do that type of work. And they'll come back with a recommendation that says you should build this many 2-bedrooms or this many 3-bedrooms or this many studios, and this is how big they should be, and this is how much you should rent them for. So that's a piece of work that that is internal to our process, right? Because we don't want to build something that we can't rent, or we don't want to build anything that people aren't happy with. So that's a piece of work that we would undertake to understand the market, both from a unit size perspective, but also from a pricing perspective, but also like a bedroom mix and a building mix, that sort of thing.
Okay, thanks. And I guess I'm just not curious, who does these market studies? And
yeah, there's a number of companies. So Altus would be one that we'd use. SVN Advisors is another one. There's a number of companies that would do that type of work.
okay, this one's more of just a comment, which is this is what I'm hearing a lot of as a new counselor. My background's community development, so I do these kind of jobs, but from a community development, social perspective. And so I'm hearing this market demand all the time, bottom line, market demand, and I'm just trying to make sense of what that looks like. And market demand doesn't entirely make sense to me when I know we have an affordable housing crisis, and I keep being told, oh, whatever the market demands will provide. But if that were true, then we wouldn't have an affordable housing crisis. So I'm just curious how those two things jive.
Yeah. So I guess where we struggle in providing affordable housing is that in new construction, right? New construction, as we know, is expensive, right? It's much more effective to provide affordable housing. From our perspective, it's much preferable to take existing units and make them good quality and make them clean and livable and affordable, and build new units and move the people that can afford to move into newer units, move those people out of older stock, that frees up older stock for people to live in that older stock. So that's how we come at it. Building new affordable housing is a request that we hear in every municipality across the country. If it were easy, everyone would do it, right? It's the difficulty from our perspective is where new construction is so expensive. There's so much pressure from a construction cost perspective. It makes it really difficult to get the returns that our shareholders look for in the new construction. So that's why, again, we think that with increased supply, it will provide an opportunity to slow the cost of housing increases. But that is a struggle that every municipality is dealing with, obviously, as you know. Yeah.
Thank you. And Councillor Freeman?
Just adding on to that conversation, though, right now you're below your density targets.
That's correct.
So why couldn't you look at including housing stocks, excuse me, of things like studio units that could rent at 80% AMR and integrate that into the unit? I don't understand.
Yeah, no, we're happy to build more density on the site, and that that will be part of our conversation.
But let's be clear here. I'm not talking about increased height to get the density. I'm
No.
talking about changing your unit mix.
Mm-hmm. So, specifically, with the smaller units, that is something we'll look at when we look at demand for what's going to be rented in the market. But we also have a target demographic that we like to hit, and that demographic often includes young professionals and seniors. And young professionals and seniors aren't necessarily looking for those smaller units. Obviously there is a time and place for small units, and we will certainly be looking at a number of those in this development, but we also think there is a demand for the larger units and that we can supply.
Okay, and Councillor Budley.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. How long have you owned this property?
It's a year and a little bit.
Okay, so when you acquired the property, I guess my question is, what makes you, what drives you on this property beyond the balance sheet stuff?
Mm-hmm.
What makes you think that this property is appropriate for the amount of density that you're intending to put on it,
Mm-hmm.
and the types of housing that's going to be there? Why are you so jazzed about this project?
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Rask, I stole your jazzed.
So a number of things. The first one is its location. We think it's a great location. We think it's close to downtown, close to the LRT, close to the park, close to the recreation center. It's on 2 regional roads, so there's great access to the site. And there's a core of services that already exist on the site: the grocery store, the drugstore, the bank, the restaurants. So we think it's a place that is underutilized from a residential perspective, and we think by providing residential units on the site, they can build some excitement in the site and the existing retail experience on the site, but also bring public space to the site. The second component about, sorry, if you, your question about the why, right? Sorry, yeah. So when we purchased the property, we looked at the existing planning in place, the existing policy in place, as well as the existing zoning. And so that was part of why we bought the site, because the site had significant both minimum and maximum density for the site, as well as significant height across the site. And so that was a big part of why we purchased it, because we thought, okay, well, the city has obviously gone through a process and developed this policy and put this policy in place and put the updated land use bylaw in place to allow for the density that we're contemplating. And so from our perspective, to know that we're working with a city who's already gone through that process and has established that this is a place for significant growth, that's really positive to us, because we know we're coming into a place that can that has done that work, that legwork beforehand.
Thanks. And do you have another question? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Thanks. So hypothetically, if the height changes on Herb Street were not approved down the line, do you suspect that you can, and understanding the justification of what you said about the existing plaza, do you suspect you can achieve the density targets without us changing our zoning bylaw by building something down where the plaza is? Is that feasible, and is that likely to be your next step if the application down the line were to be denied?
It would be, but I mentioned earlier, we don't think that's the best design solution for the site. We don't think that's, we ultimately want to do what is the best solution for us as a developer and a residential landlord, but also what's best for you as a community. And we think the best design solution is the one we've proposed.
But balance sheet wise,
Yeah.
you don't think it makes sense. You wouldn't look at this if it were to be denied and say, well, we'll build what's there on Urban, we'll leave the plaza. You would look at it balance sheet wise and say, we're going to build that density down below.
I suspect so. I don't know without doing that analysis. Yeah.
And last call, Councillor Vasek.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So nice you let me have one more question. Okay, you mentioned that you wanted to make it look really beautiful, and I'm just looking at this picture right now, and I'm also not commenting on design, really. I'm just trying to understand building products and you wanting it to look beautiful. And this looks like, this is considered prefab, right?
It's precast concrete, this building is, yeah.
And is that considered good design then? That matches with what you're talking about is good design?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's a question for your staff and for our design team. But if you look through the projects that Carrie presented, there are a number of design qualities in there, and it's a mix of different typologies and different building construction methodologies that we utilize.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you, Andrew and Carrie, and thank you all for, when we first met, I said people are going to be very interested in this new site, so put up a billboard, put up stuff on your website, and you did both, so thank you very much. This community has a thirst for knowledge and wants to know what's going on around it, and it's not often that we see people put up their proactive billboards, so thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem at all.
What's that? You can just go. Next up, Mr. Trevor Hawkins. It's okay for you to go.
I'll start the clock until I pour the water.
And don't forget to take a business card from our woodworkers and support them too, Trevor. Pass them around. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, members of council. I will go through some slides and then be happy to speak further to some of the questions that council has already raised. Just to give some context, so some photos of the immediate surroundings and the site itself. The view of the site as we're standing on Westmount Road looking to the east towards the Barrel Yards project. You can see Natalie referred to the grade change, and it is fairly dramatic. The back of the Herb Street properties and then the first part of the Westmount Plaza site is sort of where the grade transitions. If we look along the south side of Herb Street, we can see the Westmount Grand building right at the corner of Urban Westmount. There's an office building and a 7-story building on the opposite corner. Office insurance company on one side, and then as we head further down Westmount, we see the mid and then higher rise buildings on the west side of Westmount. And then finally on Sunshine, the building that Natalie referred to, the 9-story building, that's effectively right across from the Dietz frontage of this property. So to answer some of the questions that council was asking of Mr. Kent, when we looked at the site, we started at the highest level of planning. We looked at the provincial policy statement, we looked at the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Do those documents support the intensification of this property? We found that they did, and we were of the opinion that they do. Then we looked to the region's official plan. Is this the right location for intensification from the regional official plan perspective? And that plan would support it. And then we looked at the City of Waterloo's official plan, and that's where we did a deeper dive into the policy framework. And as Natalie noted, the property, the entirety of the property, is in the major node. So we have a major node, all of this property, the gas station on the other side of Father David Bauer Drive, all of the lands on the west side of Westmount Road heading towards the intersection with University Avenue. And then the balance of the surrounding properties are in a minor corridor until we get to the uptown and the urban growth center boundaries. So there's an established intent for intensification on this property, on these properties, and then on the properties along the minor corridor, and then further intensification as you head towards the uptown. So with that in mind, we looked at, as Andrew was talking about, how can you develop a project or a development of this scale on this size of a property. They're very rare opportunities in Waterloo region to get a parcel with over 7 hectares that you are able to design. But it does have some constraints and some direction that we had to respect. Part of that was retaining the Westmount Plaza and what it serves for the community. and the different amenities that it offers, retaining sun life and the employment that it brings to the site, and then the constraints associated with the flood plain that Natalie put up on one of her slides. So the floodplain effectively runs through the site out towards Dietz Avenue. So it actually, in order to achieve safe access, almost forces the development towards Erb Street if you are going to put residential development on this property. You can't put residential development in this location because it's in the middle of the floodplain. Then we looked at, if we're going to move the development towards Erb Street, what are some of the other surrounding uses that we talked about on the earlier slides. So first we start with the only abutting property owner, and what kind of development is existing there and what is planned for there. So this part of the Luther Village property is actually designated. It has two different designations, permissions up to 40 meters, even though there are only townhomes there today. So we recognize that this was a sensitive interface, notwithstanding its planned permissions of 40 meters, and notwithstanding that this part of the site is already zoned in the new bylaw for 81 meters. We wanted to be sensitive to that interface, and that was another reason why we wanted to move the development further away from that interface and closer to Erb Street. So, as Natalie alluded to, this building actually has four-story, 7-story, and then it's all the way over here is where you get to 11 stories. And it meets all of the tower separation regulations in the new zoning bylaw. And this is a parking structure which will eventually serve the employees of Sun Life. And again, it's a 3-story structure with an open-air 4th level. And then we looked at, how do people move around this site? So if we have the development fronting on Erb Street, how do they get into the existing part of the site, and how do they get into the new part of the site? We have an existing access on Westmount Road. We have an existing access off Father David Bauer Drive. There is an existing access off Dietz Avenue now that's used primarily for the Sun Life parking area. So we wanted to maintain an access off Dietz Avenue and not create too many more accesses on the regional roads. So the primary access from Dietz Avenue will be as the shared street that we alluded to earlier. So the purpose of the shared street is to create all along this spine green spaces, open spaces for employees of Sun Life, for residents of Luther Village, for residents who live south of this site in the neighborhood to the south, as well as residents who will move into these buildings. Places for them to gather, places for them to visit the commercial uses, and places for them to interact in a social way. So rather than concentrate all of the amenity in this project on the rooftops or in 7th floor or 10th floor indoor amenity spaces so that the residents become isolated from the community, we wanted to bring the residents out of the buildings and bring the community into the site. So that was the genesis for the Flex Street or the Winner Street. And then we looked at, well, we don't want all the traffic and all the people who are coming to the site to use this Flex Street. So we've created a right-in, right-out access off Erb Street. And the idea here is if I'm traveling westbound on Erb Street, I can turn into the site and I can access this. If I'm a resident of the building, be for residents only, I can access this parking structure and I can access this parking structure. So that way it splits the traffic onto the regional roads as appropriate, with the existing entrance here, which largely serves the plaza and the Sun Life, and then some access off Dietz Avenue for the buildings that might be closer there. Natalie's shown some of these. So what the idea here with concentrating the commercial uses on the internal street was that we wanted to complement the existing Westmount Plaza rather than push the commercial uses out towards Dietz Avenue or Erb Street and draw customers away from the plaza onto the perimeter of the site. We wanted to work with the plaza and augment the plaza, and so that there would be some interaction between the commercial uses that are there today and those that would be there as part of the redevelopment. The Erb Street buildings will have residential units facing the street. The idea here is that Erb Street right now, notwithstanding the spiritual use, is largely characterized by residential uses, so it will have a residential feel to it with walk-up units facing the street. The mixed-use part of these buildings will actually be behind and facing the internal street. This is looking towards Westmount Street up here, so a public park entryway into the site from Westmount Road, and we can see that this structure, which is actually partially 2 floors below grade if you're standing on Herb Street, presents itself for some active commercial spaces on the internal street. Another reason why we decided to focus those active spaces, the commercial active spaces on the internal street, to take advantage of the grades and design accordingly. So you can see that the design of the flex street is meant to be equally shared amongst vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists, and we expect there to be a lot of movement amongst the site, so it won't be a highway for vehicles. So this is a broader view of the flex street, so Dietz Avenue in this location, the stepped building I alluded to earlier, some additional office complementing the Sun Life building here, and then looking down the flex street with its public spaces towards the park in the previous image, and then the other existing mid and high-rise buildings in the immediate area. So in terms of our official plan amendment, quickly I'll summarize it. Effectively, we wanted to start with one land use designation rather than having a residential and a commercial designation effectively going through the middle of buildings. We wanted to start with one land use designation and then work from there. We wanted to designate the lands along Herb Street for greater height, as I alluded to earlier, and then introduce some specific provision area policies to address some of the design and transition matters that we've spoken about, namely to allow the commercial uses to be oriented towards Dietz Avenue and Herb Street rather than, or to the internal street rather than Dietz Avenue, which we feel is more of a residential character. So we wanted to build in a special policy that would allow ground floor residential on Dietz Avenue and Herb Street because they have a more residential character. We didn't want to increase, even though the request itself on paper would be termed high density, we don't want to build high density buildings along Dietz Avenue. We in fact would lower the height of this portion of the site and maintain that 40-meter height along Dietz Avenue, and then to permit the minor reduction in the gross leasable commercial area for the site that Natalie spoke to. And it's important for council to distinguish the gross leasable area requirement on this site actually doesn't allow you to count office uses towards that minimum requirement. And this site actually has a fair amount of office use, and we're introducing more, but we're not able to count that gross leasable area towards that minimum requirement. And that's in large part why we need that special policy. So we look at the existing zoning, C181, as Natalie spoke about. So the main component of the request is really just this part of the site to rezone the balance of the lands with some of those site specifics to deal with the transition along Dietz Avenue, residential permissions at grade. There's an underground parking structure along Herb Street, so it's actually 1.9 meters until we hit this line here, but there's a jog in the property fabric actually where you hit these last few properties along Herb Street, and that's why it goes down to 0.6 just for this last stretch. But that's the only location where that setback or any setback relief is required. We look at when we were designing the site, the tower regulations in the new zoning bylaw. So they all have, the towers all have podiums. They all meet the tower separation, both internal and external, particularly along the Luther Village boundary. They all meet the tower horizontal tower dimensions. They all meet the footprint requirements, and they all have step backs from the podium. The only parts of the buildings that don't meet the 3-meter requirement for step back are these corner features you can see that are on the buildings. Those corner features are a 2-meter step back rather than the required 3. Some of the buildings have 12-meter step backs. So in terms of the height, just to put up a slide that really I hope clarifies things. The idea here is the orange is your existing 40-meter permission. All of the pale color is existing 81, so there actually is 81-meter permission along Dietz Avenue. We are going to limit the height along Dietz Avenue in this box to 40 meters and introduce more height in the hatched area. The property itself would be permitted over 5,000 bedrooms, and the project is proposing 1,400. It equates to about 200 bedrooms per hectare, and even if you subtracted the Westmount Plaza and argued, well, you're not really developing the Westmount Plaza, and said you're only developing the other half of the site, it would still be under 400 bedrooms per hectare, which is less than the permitted density along Dietz Avenue in the new zoning bylaw. So it's not a very dense development in terms of its residential permissions. And then we look at the city's height and density schedule. So the lands on the south side of Herb Street are actually designated for 12 stories, 40 meters. We have employment, high density to the west, and we have medium density to the east, and we have the Luther Village, which again is medium high and medium. So the property is actually surrounded by lands that are planned for anything from medium to high density development, and we felt it was an appropriate location to locate some intensification because it was well buffered from low density areas. In terms of transportation, of course, we looked at that, and Matt Brower from Paradigm Transportations is here this evening if there are any specific questions about transportation. There's several existing transit routes that serve the property, including a number of them immediately abut the subject lands with a bus stop right at Herb and Westmount. There are cycling lanes on a portion of Herb and Father David Bauer. There's planned lanes on Herb Street west or east of Westmount, as well as on Westmount Road. The only real loss of service or level of service issue in the area in terms of traffic is the left turn. If you're heading north on Westmount and you want to turn left on to go west onto Herb Street, the turning lane isn't of adequate depth to handle that traffic, as anyone, myself included, who has traveled along there would well know. There is an eastbound left turn lane warranted from Herb Street onto Dietz Avenue today, so it would be warranted under current and proposed conditions, with or without the development. None of the unsignalized intersections warrant signalization. And then to alleviate some of the turning movements on or from Dietz onto Herb Street, the report recommends that a right turn lane be created so you can turn right from Dietz and head west on Herb Street. So in conclusion, and to summarize things, we did look at all the planning documents, starting at the provincial level and working our way through the regional and municipal level, and we felt this was an appropriate location for the redevelopment that we've put forward, and that the Herb Street frontage was an appropriate area for some increase in height, with the height transitioning towards Westmount and Herb, where the existing fabric already includes a number of buildings of similar or medium and high density development. So we feel that the development itself introduces, it's one of the rare developments actually that can speak to a complete community. It has jobs, it has residents, it has shopping, it has your weekly needs. So you can work here and shop here, you can live here and shop here, you can live here and you can work here. And there aren't too many developments that can say that all on the same property, and we felt that was another strong attribute. And then we feel that the design of the site addresses all of the public street frontages, and we're happy with the work that, I'm very pleased with Andrew Bousfield Architects and the work that they've done, and Andrew and Ashley from ABA Architects are here this evening if council has specific questions about the wonderful design they've done.
Thank you, Trevor. Questions of clarification for Delegate Councillor Freeman, Councillor Bonagor?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So I'm just trying to better understand the parking requirements. I see that in the parking justification study you have the breakdown, but the number of units listed there appears to be different than what's in the planning justification study. You've listed the number of units here as 1,014, but in the planning justification it was listed as 1,360.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, there's 1,014 units. The proposed parking rate is 0.6 spaces per unit for residents.
Well, can we look at these reports and get the numbers right? Because I'm trying to also understand how much bike parking you're providing relative to the proposed bylaw, and because as it is right now, I don't know what is the right number, but if you use the 1360 in the justification report, that means according to the bylaw you would need 1,496 and you're providing 1,526, which allows 30 parking spaces effectively for 38,000 square meters of commercial. And so I'm trying to understand, do you expect, the 1,195 parking spaces down to 30 that everyone's coming by bike or bus? And so I'm trying to rationalize that. And by the way, it's in so many places, I'm finding it frustrating. So in a future application, can we actually have a site plan that gives me a matrix on the site plan that actually shows what's happening on this site? Because I find it really confusing going through 3 reports. And with regard to the parking justification report, it will be helpful to really double down on how it is we expect these parking spaces to be used and or shared. And like I'm not commenting per se on the rate. I just want to better understand it. With regard to the bike parking too, if we can get a breakdown of Class A versus Class B, I think that's going to be really helpful. And also whether or not you plan to allow Class A bike parking to support the actual commercial operations, or whether you're planning to create Class A only within storage lockers, for example, that would be exclusive use to the residential. It would be really helpful for this development to consider some kind of bike shelters if you're really leaning in on that much alternative transportation use. Yeah, I don't know. I have tons of questions, but those were the ones I was focusing on right now. I'll wait and see if more pop to the surface. Okay. But I do think addressing the transportation corridors and how you expect people to use this site and where you expect them to be if they're not in a car will be incredibly helpful.
Next up, Councillor Bonagor, Henry Vasic.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thank you for the extra information. I saved some questions for you. When Natalie was giving the overview, she mentioned a couple of places where you'd be requesting fairly significant reductions in the setbacks. Can you, given that you've got such a lot of land to be working with, what's the reasoning behind that kind of encroachment into the public space?
So the through your Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Bonagor, the only setback relief we're requesting is for the underground structure that runs from here to here along Herb Street. So from here to here, the setback is 1.9 meters underground. And then from here to the corner, it's 0.6 because there's a jog in the property fabric. The rest of the site meets the setbacks.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, then the setbacks are underground. It wouldn't affect the street.
You would not see them.
Okay. First question done. Thank you. With the flux street, as you're calling it, from the look of the entry and exits to the buildings, it strikes me that that could actually carry a fair amount of traffic. And while I understand the idea is for it to be low speed traffic because it's a shared zone, do you have some design ideas as to how you can actually affect driver behaviour to ensure that that's the case?
Through you again, Mayor Jaworski, I think the detailed design of a site of this scale will have to wait a little bit further. I think we do have some ideas for sure. We have a team of transportation engineers and landscape architects who will be working to figure out the best way to manage the flow of traffic, which we would expect naturally. There'll be some traffic that comes off Dietz Avenue, but it does, the advantage of a site like this is you do have multiple accesses, and we've tried to reduce the pressure on Dietz Avenue by making those other accesses available and enticing. So that's one strategy, and then the other strategy will be some design techniques that we'll be working through on our side, and then in collaboration with staff as well.
So I'm getting a bit ahead of myself there. Okay. This is a very large project. Can you give us an idea of the timeline that you're looking at? What would you start with, and how long would the entire thing take?
Well, I mean, at the risk of assuming some level of support from council, if I'm at liberty to make that assumption, there is a phasing plan which we've laid out in our documents. And the idea is we would start with phase 1 would be this building in this location, primarily because of the need to build the parking structure to provide parking for the existing office component of the Westmount Place Plaza. And then we would work our way around the site, this being phase 4, this being phase 3, phase 2 in this area, and then finally phase 5 would be where the Michaels is today. So that would enable us to, if Michaels is still interested in being located here, to move Michaels into a building such as this, which is geographically and more visible, preferred for that operation. So that's that being said, the time frames would be, I mean, we're certainly 2 years to initiate and build a building in phase 1, and then as the project evolves, it could be 10 years or so.
And finally, given the high amount of public interest in the development, would you be able to outline some of the plans that you have when it comes to community engagement and information sessions?
Absolutely. I've fortunately, I know Ms. Hardacre fairly well, having worked a long time with her, so we've been in constant communication, and she's alerted me to the broad interest from the community, and we're certainly quite happy to work with staff to set up a neighborhood meeting and work with yourself if there's neighborhood associations that wish to be included. If they're not within whatever distance staff feels is an appropriate circulation, we'd of course include anyone who signed in on the registry this evening, and be more than happy to have that kind of a meeting.
Next up, Councillor Henry Vasic Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Trevor, for the detailed presentation, as well as to Andrew and Carrie for the overview from the applicant's perspective. We don't always get that. I think that's a helpful addition to ask different kinds of questions about where this is going. So I had a few for you. One, Natalie in her presentation spoke to how staff would review the request for a change in height along Herb Street, and if the review of policies suggested that yes, this was the right location and could handle and warrant all of those, then they'd look to staff would look to Section 37 to be able to dispense with that. I remember reviewing planning documents that you provided that are available online. I didn't see any mention of that, so I was just curious as to the applicant's view of staff's approach on this matter.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I know when I come here, I'm going to get very good questions from Councillor Henry, so I always try to prepare myself. Natalie has already alerted us to the fact that staff's preference is that this proceeds through a Section 37 for the height increase. Our submission evaluated from an official plan perspective, as well as the other documents I alluded to, whether it was appropriate to increase the height here, irrespective of whether a Section 37 was a tool that could be used. We're certainly happy to further engage with staff if they feel that's the right tool to use in this location.
I know there was, I don't want to draw parallels to identify where I think a process should go, because that's not appropriate at this stage. But I know that when you were here on 70 King, it started in one way and ended recognizing that staff's approach was the right approach to take. So I note that as a precedent on that matter. So given the interest from staff in looking at the height request along Herb from a Section 37 perspective, you heard my question earlier around the existing developments along Dietz, and I'm sure you've been aware of the attention in the media around that issue and questions of affordability and folks feeling like they're being pushed out. And I guess the question I would have through you is, does your client see a place for them to go in this development? Or at least for some number of units that are similar to the number that exist on this site at a level of affordability, if they are affordable. I don't have that information. If those are things that could continue, and those are things your client would be interested in engaging staff on as part of that bonus in question.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I think we're certainly well aware that region-wide there's an affordability issue, and we're all trying to roll up our sleeves to solve it. And Section 37 is a tool that would allow some conversation to occur. Whether you could structure it in a way that guaranteed those units for the existing tenants, or whether you had to make it a bit broader in scope, I think we'd be looking to have those conversations with staff. But certainly the goal of providing it and that tool is one we'd be happy to discuss further.
Yeah, and certainly the question of height on Herb Street as a change. The planning framework's been set up to deal with a certain view of human scale development and framing of the street. This offers a different view. So I just noted this time I'd need to be convinced through submissions and analysis that as staff would, that it's appropriate, because it is a change from the existing framework. So the one last question I have for you, question that Councillor Bonigar asked around the Warnorth and the ability to actually manage traffic. That's a good one. But I wanted to ask about the parking structure from a design perspective. That certainly was an issue that went to the LPAT down in Kitchener for Bright Up 3, and had some interesting results from that. So certainly you're aware of the interface challenges that parking structures face. Can you speak to how your design team is thinking about that? It appears like that's a very early addition in construction phasing for your site, so that's something people would see very quickly.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I think we're focused on the grade change. So there is a grade change between where the parking structure would be located and where those townhomes are currently existing. Is there a way to improve the grading situation without compromising engineering, to lower the difference in heights in that area? Is there a way to design that facade so we are presenting an attractive facade without allowing penetration of headlights, both within the structure and of course at the top as well? So we don't want to create a behemoth parking structure that imposes on people's amenity space in their rear yards. We're very aware of that whole interface with the building and the structure as well. And so we will be, I'm sure, discussing it with some of the residents who live there at the neighborhood meeting that Councillor Bonigar will host, and maybe they can give us some ideas as to things that they would like us to consider as well.
Thank you. Next up, Councillor Vasek, Councillor Freeman.
Thanks, through Mayor Jaworski. So I think this council is tasked with a really cool task, which is we get to be involved in this intensification and what that brings, which is these really important conversations about affordable housing, which we've talked a lot about, but it does also talk about like good design, right? So, and because that's a newer area for me, I'm just curious, like I'm seeing in the other picture that it's sort of a corner full of glass, and I just don't know, that's something I'd also like you to be talking about with staff and helping me understand, like, is that really good? What does good design mean? And does good design also mean timeless? And is what's being built here good, timeless? I'm not sure, but it's something that I'd be interested in hearing more about from you as well as staff. And then my second question is, Natalie also mentioned that you have plans to build sustainably. So I was curious a little bit more about that. If you could speak to both of those, that would be great.
I'll answer if I may, Mayor Jaworski, the second question first, and then I may call upon esteemed architect Andrew Bousfield to help you answer the second question. In terms of, Natalie has made us aware of a group that exists at the regional level with the utilities as well, so Waterloo, North Hydro, Kitchener Utilities, Union Gas, and she has offered to arrange a meeting with Killam, the project team, city staff, as well as this committee that's set up at the regional level to look at ways to use energy effectively on this property. So we're looking forward to having that conversation. We've started to think of ways to think sustainably on the site. And one of those ways you can sort of see on the image here is we've got solar shades. So they're actually, I believe they were proposed as part of the Evolve 1 project in the R&T Park. So that may be a recent example. It's a similar concept, so it would provide shade for the vehicles that are in the open air on the top deck, and also they're solar panels, so they generate electricity. So we're already thinking along those lines, but we're also interested in talking with this committee and seeing if there's other ways that we can move that conversation ahead. And then I may call Mr. Bousfield up to speak to design.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. What constitutes good design in 5 minutes or less? I guess the first thing that I should probably let you all know and remind perhaps some of the new councillors, there is the site plan review process. And so all of this design, this site plan and its individual components will go through a very detailed scrutiny at a staff level. And so decisions about architecture in terms of how much glass, perhaps whether or not that corner element that Trevor spoke to earlier is appropriate. I'm not sure that we're really there yet, and certainly urban design staff here at the city haven't had an opportunity yet because we haven't made a formal site plan application. I will tell you that a lot of what you see here is informed by what I believe to be best practices from an urban design standpoint as it's seen and perceived by staff, and particularly the built form. So we generally would describe these as point blocks, so generally smaller floor plates yielding a taller, sort of slimmer profile on a podium. And that is something that is now embedded in the zoning. Not so long ago, those were part of what the city's urban design guidelines. They've now been codified. And so there are very prescriptive criteria that our buildings need to respond to, or these particular types of buildings in terms of how big they can be on an individual floor plate, the relationship of buildings not just to themselves but to their neighbors, to neighboring properties, the dimensions of the setback. So all of those kinds of urban design pieces are embedded in this design. The other thing that I would suggest, if you can, if we could zoom in on this to actually understand the fine-grained detail of this public realm, the interior landscaping and programming is frankly something I've not seen, certainly in any kind of private sector development in my career, whether it's in Waterloo, Kitchener, or Cambridge, or anywhere else we've practiced. There's some really wonderful things going on here. I think it's a place where people are going to want to come. So to that extent, certainly the way the buildings feel, the way people experience them as they walk by them, as they move through them and in and out of them, will be hugely important, and staff will have their chance to work with the team, as they always do, to come to what we all hope is an excellent result. Does that make you feel a little better?
I'm not indicating whether I'm feeling good or bad about this. I'm kind of working my way through urban design guidelines, official plans, the comprehensive zoning bylaws, and these questions come from a place of curiosity and not from a place of an assessment of good or bad or yes or no. Thank you for that.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. Last up, I think, is Councillor Freeman. Oh, Councillor Bodley is last up.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So, again, I've been focusing a lot on this relationship between bicycle parking and automotive parking, and the request on this application for a very significant transportation demand management shift. And I appreciate you've done a lot of work in terms of site master planning. There's a big piece missing on this site where it relates to transportation master planning, because the transportation justification report is not accounting for 976 bicycles to potentially access this site. There is no on-road bike infrastructure on Herb Street, no on-road bike infrastructure on Westmount. There is no dedicated bike boxes to accommodate left turns at Westmount. It only talks about staging cars, not staging bikes. Similarly, on Herb Street, the revitalized laneway I anticipate will have a very steep slope, which may not be the most preferred choice for cyclists to use to access this site. And so if the TDM report and the parking justification report, the justification report has to be expanded so that it accounts for traffic and travel by bike. Right now, the existing number of bikes on that road is something like 3. And why? Because it's a terrible road to cycle on, especially when you're sharing that same side street with buses, which you've allocated as being a priority for your site access. And so now you're bringing in conflict between pedestrians, cyclists, buses, cars, and so that the TDM report right now is completely inept in terms of addressing the issues around the number of bicycles that you expect to see this site being used. The other piece I need information on is going to be with regard, I mentioned the need for covered bike parking for the commercial space, but it has to be secure. It absolutely has to be secure or people aren't going to use it. And so, and like I said before, I'm not commenting on whether or not I think the balance between car use and bike use and parking spaces is right or wrong, but right now there's a big justification piece that's missing for me. Because when a development of this size goes in, it's not uncommon that the region or the city may ask for infrastructure upgrades to the transportation systems that surround it. And right now we're missing an entire mode share on those very, very dramatically significant roads.
Was there a question there? No, I'm serious.
The question is to staff to have the transportation justification report updated to account for 976 bicycle trips.
Okay, fair.
In and out of this site, like they're not all going to go down a 10% slope on a revitalized laneway. Well, they might like to go down it. And then what? Are they expecting them to drive through private property around this property to access Dietz Ave? I don't know the answer, but I think we need the answer.
Okay, fair enough. Councillor Bodley, take us home.
Thank you, through Mayor Jaworski. I'm really struggling, and I'm hoping you can clarify for me the traffic flow and where people are going within this lot here. So maybe I'll just go sort of one by one here. If you're in tower 1, 2, 3, or 4, you're coming in off Herb Street where that public art area is listed there and going underground. Is that? Let's start there, I guess.
So the access you refer to would allow you to access either of those buildings or those towers. It doesn't mean that's the only way you can.
Okay. How else would you access your parking space? You can access
the structures from the internal street as well.
And then to access the proposed 4-story parking structure, which my understanding based on your comments is for Sun Life employees, how are you anticipating people accessing that? From the revitalized laneway or off of Dietz?
Well, I suspect many Sun Life employees already access the site off of Westmount, and they can continue to do so. They could also access it off Dietz, which they do today. So they would have those two options. I suspect the revitalized laneway, when it is revitalized, will be the least attractive way.
So that's so this kind of leads me to my I'm really struggling to see how you're going to turn that into a shared street, given the amount of vehicular traffic that's going to be going through there. In terms of how all those people can access there, there's also going to be commercial that backs into the street, into the living street, or however you want to term it. There's parking spaces listed there. So I'm kind of struggling to see that, although I applaud the idea. I really do. I'm just, with cars being able to come from all directions towards that parking structure for their residents, I guess I'm kind of missing it a little bit. And if you have no comment on that, I'll leave that.
Yep.
But my next question in that regard, sort of along those lines, is: so if you live in one of the things that you're espousing as a benefit here is the idea that people who are living in those towers are going to have commercial access to the supermarket and the other amenities within the plaza, and I think, excuse me. So I think the pedestrian realm is going to be extremely important, and so whether we're terming it a shared street or whether it's really a laneway with a pedestrian laneway as well too, I think where it falls apart a little bit for me, and I'd be curious what the plans are, is in the revitalized parking lot for the plaza, because I suspect, in dealing with residents in my area, that as it's currently constructed, doing the Pythagoras walk from the corner right across is going to be a bit of a challenge as it currently is constituted. And so I think that I'd be really interested to see what the revitalized parking lot looks like with respect to whether or not there are pedestrian islands within there to allow people to access the supermarket when they're walking from their tower without going all the way around in a slightly circuitous way, which I suspect they wouldn't actually do. And then the impact on the number of parking spaces that might have is something that I think we need to consider as well too, if we are allowing for more crosswalks and pedestrian islands, et cetera, in that parking lot.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I think the intent of the Flex Street is to create a space that's welcoming for all modes of transportation. It's not the intent to suggest that people won't be driving there and that we can't design the space to accommodate everyone's movement. And if we're looking at how does someone get from this building to the food store on the same property, perhaps if we pull back a little bit and we think to ourselves, I can live on the same property and work there and also go to a grocery store without using a vehicle, perhaps the positives of that outweigh some movements around the site that we'll work with staff to design and make sure that they're safe and attractive.
Completely not suggesting that the positives don't outweigh the negative. In fact, I agree that the positives outweigh the negative. I just think it's I'm having a hard time envisioning it right now, I guess, and particularly I'm certain that you can come up with something to fix the revitalized parking lot in the area of the supermarket. I'm not concerned about that. I'm just highlighting it. On the living street part, the idea that it's going to be welcoming for pedestrians is in conflict with the idea that there are cars coming from every direction, to me. So that's my comment on it.
Thank you, and I think that's the first time Pythagoras has been referenced at this council table, so thank you for bringing up Pythagoras. Seeing no further questions, thank you. Andrew, thank you. Trevor. Doug at 3 of 4. Douglas Stewart, IBI Group. Welcome, Douglas. No.
And if I may begin, for those that don't know me, my name is Douglas Stewart. I'm the planning manager of a consultant office in town. For those new on council, I have both a regional perspective. I've served there for a while. I'm now in consulting. I wish to advise you that there's an existing condominium existing condominium across the street. It's Waterloo standard condominium number 541. They are interested in what is being presented here. They are interested in what will happen and what could happen. Their board of directors is acting on behalf of many of the members. This condominium across the street is an existing residential. It's located in the southeast corner with Herb Street and Westmount. Its street address is 223 Herb Street. What I have been retained, or our firm has been retained, to provide an independent planning opinion as it relates to what's proposed and the applications in front of you to determine, as an independent perspective, are they consistent? Are they in conformity with the public policies of the province, the region, the city, and does it represent good planning? So the focus of my presentation is to ensure that for me to conclude that or formulate my opinion, there is additional information I require. So at this time, I'm not speaking to whether this is good or bad, is inconsistent, or conformity. I have reviewed all of the technical information, and I appreciate that they are available. I have spoken with staff in the preparation of this, all to ensure that when I stand before you today, I can at least bring forth my first initial response. What I need to point out is that the existing condominium across the street implements the approved planning policies. It does have a maximum height of 40 meters or 12 stories. It is designated medium, high density, and zoned the RMU-40 meters. That's important. It exists. It's the same as if it was a single detached house, a townhouse, or any other form. It's there. It has to be taken into account. The subject lands are across from what's being proposed. It's interesting that across the street from the condominium, the existing land use designations was the result of a comprehensive study undertaken by the city and implemented, and it went through a very rigorous consultation process. It has value. It's interesting that even though you did your official plan in the most recent and you did your comprehensive bylaw, you confirmed that the existing land use designations and the implementing bylaw were all acceptable. That's important. That's important to the group that I act for. I've been advised by the condominium board of directors that they don't have an objection should the proposed development implement the approved plan as it exists today. I would like to comment on the planning justification report. I would say they've done a very good perspective in trying to explain the proposal. I hear, though, through council, there's lots of more things that you're asking for. I think they've done a good job to take between the coordination of all of the proposed buildings. However, I think there's some points I'd like to bring to your attention. In the report, figure 3, it has a map there called the Transit Context Plan. If you turn after page number 8 of the report, it's interesting that the approach they took is to take the property and draw 400 meters and 800 meters, I think, from the center of the property. It's my understanding the more appropriate approach to understand how does this property relate to the rapid transit system we're all going to soon be taking advantage of. There is an existing station within 800 meters to the edge of the property, not into the property. I don't think that's the important part. I think it's to make sure the information's correct. I also want to point out, and there are preliminary renderings of what's proposed. I've heard lots of debate about what they look like and what they are. What's important is on page 24 of the report, as well as on separate information that is available on your website. I understand that the purpose of those renderings is to show the relationship between the property that I act for and the proposed building. I'm a little puzzled because I understand the condominium is 40 meters high. I understand that the proposed building is 81 meters. However, I look at it, it would appear that the condominium is reflected as being between 16 and 18 stories when in fact it's 12. The relationship is skewed. To me, there's missing pieces. If I'm to give my independent planning opinion, I need to look at the issues of planning justification. I'm going to bring to your attention a number of perspectives. Again, in the report on page 17, table 1, it says the potential persons and jobs per hectare is 418. In the 2017 provincial growth plan, it identifies 200 residents and jobs for the urban growth center, which is uptown Waterloo. The report on page 17 says in the growth plan, under policy 2.2.4.3, says for those that are serviced by a light rail transit, this applies, it's 160 residents and jobs. In my opinion, there is insufficient discussion and justification to prove there is consistency with and conformity with the public policies, as on a numbers perspective, the 418 is over twice the size of the urban growth center, which was the primary focus of development in the city, and that it's larger than the minimum, and we'll go with the minimum, as it relates to a station area. In my opinion, all of the public policies require the consideration of good planning and compatibility with adjacent, existing, and proposed from land uses, and transitions with existing neighborhood, as well as the accounting exercise of persons and jobs per hectare. To me, there needs to be much more evaluation to provide a rationalization for, one, the significant increase in the residents and jobs per hectare and the relationship to the urban growth center, uptown. The existing commercial plaza and the major node as a transit station proposes to reallocate potential density from the existing low-rise commercial plaza which is oriented to a car to adjacent to Herb Street and Westmount. This approach would appear to be the opposite intention of the approved official plan. Based on my understanding of provincial, regional, and a strong framework for the major transportation stations, there's a strong framework to support the redevelopment of such commercial plazas. In my opinion, there is insufficient discussion related to the evaluation of why this approach was preferred. So, you have an official plan. It's been through a process. Isn't it appropriate to implement it? So, when you look at the figure on page 32 in the report, it talks to how you transition from along Herb Street. So on the south side, it's appropriate to have 40 meters. The report suggests that, well, let's take advantage of that and we'll go higher on the north side. I struggle with where's the justification in transition? Just to give you an example, the proposal on the north side is 81 meters. To the south side, the existing development is 40. I'm 6'2", so take me times 2, 12.4 feet. So I'll stand on my head. That's the transition that's being proposed. The approved plan suggests otherwise. And it's interesting that when you look at the existing policy framework, the higher intensity is closer to the transit station. That's the existing policy to transition from that height of 81 to 40 to 40 to the existing. What's proposed here is the reverse. A 1 to 2 story commercial plaza upwards to 81, down to 40. In my opinion, there's insufficient discussion related to, is that the best approach? In summary, the purpose of this meeting is exactly what it's accomplishing. We've heard about what's being proposed. It needs to stand the test of time, though, is whether it's the appropriate proposal to address the provincial, the regional, and the city official plan, whether it represents good planning, and whether the proposed applications should continue as they are. Again, the group I represent, the board of directors, have no objection to the existing land use designation as provided in your official plan. Before I can provide my opinion to the board of directors, I would like the opportunity to generally consider the following. Tell me why the existing approved official plan policies could not accommodate what's proposed through a revision of how the density height is assigned and the different commercial residential. I would like to have a further review of a detailed justification of the persons and jobs per hectare for the major transit station. How come it's significantly larger than the urban growth center and it significantly exceeds the minimum of the transit station? And tell me why the existing low intensity and density automobile-oriented commercial plaza, which falls under the current land use designations, which really isn't transit supportive, should not be redeveloped as per the approved official plan. If there is a redistribution of the density and height to allow this to occur, the existing land use designations still apply to the low-density commercial, so they'll actually get what they want and still reserve the next phase, the redevelopment of the commercial plaza. It is respectively requested that council consider what I have asked and that they can be addressed through a review, and that a response be provided before any decision. I would thank you for these consideration of my comments, and this concludes my presentation. I wish to advise that I will provide a more formal written response, but there was insufficient time to do that. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you for your presentation, Douglas. Appropriate parties are certainly in the House tonight, including our Commissioner of Planning and that, so they've heard your request, and we'll see what works out to what's appropriate and what's appropriate from the applicant as well. So, and don't forget to take the business card for the woodworkers, pass it around to good friends as well. Thank you. Questions of the delegate? Councillor Freeman.
I was having, I have the planning justification report open, and I'm having really hard time finding following your page references. So I just wanted to say, I want to make sure that we're all on the same version of the report going forward. Obviously not tonight, but in the future, if people are going to make reference to the report, it would be really helpful. Because it's obviously not the PDF page numbers, it's literally the report page numbers I think you're making reference to, but some of them seemed different from what I downloaded from the website. So that's all. I was having a hard time following that.
Next up, our last registered delegate is Paul Ruppel, Residents Advisory Board of Luther Village on the Park. Welcome, Paul.
Good evening, Mayor Jawowski and fellow councillors. I represent the residents of Luther Village on the Park, and we too are interested in what is happening to this large development, which is right next to us. Luther Village on the Park is a seniors' retirement community who pay taxes and who vote in Ward 7. We're approximately 500 residents, and we're located immediately to the proposed Killam apartment REIT development. The community resides on private property whose buildings and infrastructure are repaired and maintained through the residents' fees secured from our retirement savings. Some of our highlight concerns I've indicated here is traffic congestion, safety, privacy concerns, noise and air quality, and environmental impact on the current habitat of bird and wildlife in the area which we enjoy, and also the densification impact on the senior residential community in this area. Increased traffic concerns. Okay, now they're talking about coming in here on Dietz Avenue, and just for you, we are located, there's 5 or 6 of us here, right along this area here, and they're putting a structure, a large parkade, right behind 3 or 4 of ours building here. So during the terms of construction, we're wondering how is construction, how is Killam going to divert some of the traffic that is obviously going to come through off of Dietz and through our private property and out onto Father David Power Drive. And also, once the site has been fully developed, what are they going to do to ensure that this thoroughfare does not become an alternate for people going through here and wanting to access the shopping center? There are certain areas of concern as well, because as the people are coming through here, and this is a fairly busy area right now, all of these homes along here, here, and here, we all have garages that back out onto the street and present a hazard to those of us who live there. So that's one of our safety concerns. And also the increased traffic. These roads weren't built to handle trucks and major construction vehicles, which I'm sure we'll see going through here. They tend to break up the pavement. And we end up having to pay for those costs through our maintenance fees. There's also a lane that they're proposing, which will come off of wherever my little mouse is here. And I have a feeling that in reading this and looking at this document, this is now basically just a lane for some deliveries. There's parking along there, and it looks like it's going to become a two-way lane with bike traffic. And part way along here, the residents of Luther Village have an access to go through to the shopping center, the drugstore, the banks, the whatever. And over this past winter, we had some severe safety concerns with that crossway because it was poorly maintained. There was snow buildup, and there's traffic goes through there, and we're just wondering what Killam would do to mitigate the situation and perhaps put some kind of a pedestrian walkway through there and have it so designated so that the residents would be able to walk through there without having to worry, because people go through there with wheelchairs, with walkers, with canes. This is a retirement community, so you have to look after us. I mentioned health issues. This past week there was an interesting article in the Globe and Mail about this Toronto-based Envisions company, and they're doing business around the world. As you know, those of us who have problems with air quality, and those of you who suffer asthma, these people have done studies to suggest that the daily ingestion of smog and pollutants from cars and other chemicals increase the risk of heart attacks, cancer, and dementia. And that's something that we don't need. The other thing that I wanted to point out is they're planning on putting a large garage where that little red arrow goes. I walked around the parking lot on Sunday. It's roughly 2 acres. There were 300 spaces for 350 cars, and they're going to put them into that building. And those of us who live behind that building, we're wondering how they're going to mitigate the noise and the pollution from exhaust. I said, can you imagine 300 people arriving to work in the morning and hitting little things, and then we're going to hear bing, 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 bing 300 times, and going home at night, bing, 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 bing. Like, it's going to be disruptive for those who want to use our backyards. And also, with prevailing winds and that, we're going to be exposed to smoke, exhaust, and things that we really don't need in our life. So we're also wondering if they would look at the information that we showed there previously that came from these people and that are doing business, and the ventilation systems that they put in, if they are located, if they would direct the air in a manner other than into our backyards, and also considering putting up a building that's completely closed in the back so that we don't get all this noise into our area. And the same thing will happen in the other area behind the laneway, where they go from a little lane with some parking to now a two-way traffic route. There's one other way coming into the area. One of the gentlemen suggested that it was a low traffic area, this new area that's going through the center of the subdivision. Well, I would like to know how it's going to be a low traffic area when you've got 250 to 300 cars in a 4-level parking garage wanting to leave, coming in or going out, when there's still only the 2 ways to come in and out. That's going to be a major thoroughfare. There's also privacy concerns with those of us who live along both sides, where when we have to have a building that's 4 stories or higher, that they're going to be able to disrupt our lifestyle, looking into our backyards, and that type of thing. So we would like to think that there's a lot of trees along there that have been there for over 20 years. that provide some bit of privacy, and we're wondering if they would disappear or if they would give some consideration to maintaining that part of our property, because those trees seems to be outside of the fence that's a designation on the back of our properties. And we saw nothing in the provision, and we're certainly early, but some of these contractors, they submit requests to council to amend and extend the noise and construction hours. And we'd like to think that council would respect the current construction hours. If they're from 7 till 5, we'd like them to stay at 7 to 5 and not see construction starting earlier in the morning or having trucks going through our property. After all, it is private property. So that's another one of our concerns. And right now we enjoy some of our neighbors. In fact, we have a neighbor that lives on, you probably all know the giraffe lady, if she was here. Oh, she's right here. Yeah. I guess she went home. She lives on the corner and she loves feeding birds. We've got geese and ducks and every kind of bird, cardinals. We have red foxes going through, we have deer going through, rabbits. We're going to lose a lot of that. And a lot of us have enjoyed seeing that wildlife going through our backyards. So we wonder what kind of consideration will be given, Killam will give to replacing the lost vegetation and all the mature trees and shrubs that we're going to probably lose. And one thing that seems to be skating around the whole issue is the densification impact. You're talking about adding over 1,000 units. We've got the barrel yards is going to put up another 2 towers. One's already starting to go up, so it'll be up to 5. There's other projects in the area. Where is all this traffic going to go on a two-lane road on Herb Street or Westmount, and or on Dietz Avenue, which in the wintertime it's basically down to 1 lane. I mean, if you should come over there and see the cars coming out of the parking lot and trying to access Herb Street, it's almost impossible. Now, it's certainly difficult for our people living in our community to get in and out of there. And certainly Sunshine Avenue is no alternative because it's probably a mire of about 100 potholes, anywhere from 6 to 8 inches deep, all the way along. And the people that work in the shopping center, they're using both those streets for parking. And there's signs that say 2-hour parking. I don't think anybody checks that because there's cars that are there all day from 9 until 5. So I guess the densification is going to impact our safety, our health, and in the end probably even could impact us financially because we don't know how this is going to affect property values as all this begins. Oh, sorry. Got a little bit ahead of myself there. Yeah, as I said to the gang, this is the first time I've ever had to do a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to be 81 years old, so what do I know? You guys are all ahead of me with all this. So in conclusion, we've expressed all kinds of concerns as residents, as property owners. Don't forget there's 500 of us in there that we pay taxes, we vote. In Ward 7. I remember that. And I was interested that one of the gentlemen said that, I think it was Trevor, said that they're planning to have consulting sessions with their surrounding neighbors. So I hope we're one of those neighbors that they will sit down and talk to so we can review all of these issues with respect as to how they're going to affect the quality of life of the people that live in Luther Village. And respectfully, Mayor, thank you for the time to make this presentation.
Well, congratulations. I'll make a certificate for you. And that's clapping for Paul's first PowerPoint. So there we go. We'll take it at that. I think we all really appreciate you aggregating a lot of comments, and I'm sure there's more from the neighbors at Luther Village, and I think we can take kill them at their word that they're willing to have discussions with the community, and thank you for laying out what you have there. But questions from, I'll turn over to Councillor Bonagor.
Through you, Mayor, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and thank you for, as the Mayor said, bringing everything together so concisely. You are certainly one of the key communities that we'll be reaching out to, that I'll be touching base with as this goes through all of the process steps. But I would also encourage people to please, if you haven't already, to sign up at the desk as you came in, because then you'll be on the email list to also receive updates and information and invitations to meetings. You are one of the key communities. Surrounding neighbours on the other side and around it are also key communities. So I'm thanking you for bringing your concerns at this early stage, and look forward to talking with you more about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Freeman.
Excuse me, just a question to staff. I think.
Do you have any question to the delegate?
I don't have any questions for delegation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And what we'll do is also I see Acting Commissioner Heptich here, who was probably taking notes of your bylaw concerns of the parking on Sunshine Street, and you'll get that to your team members on that. I saw him taking notes. Thank you. Councillor Freeman, please.
My question is to staff. Councillor Bonagor just reminded me of something. We asked people to provide their contact information, but not everyone necessarily has email addresses and or email accounts that they check on a routine basis. So are we going to use some other kinds of strategies to help connect with the residents that live in community with one another adjacent to this property?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Freeman. In addition to the names we will be collecting tonight at the sign-in sheet, I have already compiled a list of names and addresses or email addresses of individuals that I've been speaking to over a number of weeks now. Many, I'm sure, that are here tonight. In addition to, typically what we do is we request that individuals provide the means in which they wish to be contacted. So whether that's an email address, whether that's mail, or whether it's a phone number. Typically we prefer mail and email so that we can provide them with documents rather than verbal communication, which provides them additional information. But yes, we're very much open to receiving or providing information in any form that's convenient for individuals.
Great. Good question, good answer. I'd also draw your attention to correspondence we received from Marguerite Gravette on the safety issue of crossing over through the gateway there. Thank you, Marguerite. And are there anyone else present here tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Yes, sir. Please come up. You'll have 5 minutes. And if you're interested as well, come on up. And is there anybody else interested here tonight other than these two delegates? Last call. Okay, so we have two for 5 minutes. Thank you. Please give your name and municipality, please.
So, Mayor, Council, and staff, my name is Al Way, and I live at 223 Herb Street, which is the condominium across the street from what is being proposed. I won't take 5 minutes, but I'd just like to take you through some notes. I am here tonight to object to the proposed zone change and official plan change put forward by the applicant. I also have 35 signed objections that in the short period of time I was able to put together to bring of others that have also voiced their objection to this intensification on Herb Street. Many of them are here tonight that have signed. When I decided to move into 223 Herb Street, I knew that a 12-story building could be built across the street from us. And I'm okay with that. But I'd like to ask staff and council to support the long-term planning vision that was put in place to allow a maximum of 12 stories or 40 meters is what it is with the new RMU zoning. As this was the vision, the long-term vision for this corridor was to give the 12 stories, and then, as you know, the zoning behind it down into where the plaza is, it allows them to go to 80 meters. That was already put in place years ago, and it was reconfirmed by council only 9 months ago that that was still what the vision was for that quarter. So I'm asking staff and council to carry that vision forward. If the current proposal is allowed, it is going to be too high to Herb Street, and it will permanently scar that streetscape. So again, I'm just going to ask council and staff to support the current zoning and the current official plan that is on that site, which is the 40 meters on the front of the site along Herb Street and the 80 meters that is allowed down into where the plaza is. And that's my comments.
Thank you very much for the quick commentary, Al. Questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you. And next up, please state your name and municipality.
Hi, my name is Sandy Lovis. That's L-O-V as in Victor, A-S. I live at 9 Dietz, one of the apartment buildings slated to be removed for the project. I just wanted to say that I have no ill will against Killam themselves. If it wasn't them, it'd be somebody else. And I was actually familiar with Killam before they bought the properties. And I know that they treat their tenants well and try to offer them benefits because the retail company I worked for actually signed on with them for the Killam Card program, which allowed their tenants to get discounts at retail stores that signed on to this. But that said, I can only speak to my current situation. And I know that there's nothing I can do to prevent my apartment from going. And the powerlessness I feel over that, you can't really even put that to words. And this is not the first time I've been forced to move from where I live, but at least this time, I won't end up on the streets. I will struggle. The rent when I move will be crazy high, but I'll manage. I've always managed. But I'm worried for some of the people in my building who won't be able to manage. They won't be able to pay rent anywhere else in the city. This isn't just about my one building. It's about the hundreds of other people living in Waterloo that are in constant fear this same thing will happen to them. If people are forced to move, rent goes up exponentially. People are on fixed incomes, people are on low incomes, people already have roommates. We're in a situation right now where people are living in abusive situations with abusive neighbors, abusive landlords, abusive partners because they can't afford to move anywhere else. Ontario Works is currently only $733. ODSP is slightly more than that. The market rate for rent is more than those amounts. So we are basically telling people when they have hit rock bottom, when they need our assistance, we have no place for them to stay in Waterloo. And when it comes to the income inequality, I can speak to that too. Because it would take a single parent over 50 hours a week, every week, no vacation, no holidays, no sick days, just to reach the bare minimums, to live paycheck to paycheck, never minding any emergencies that come up. As a single person, I'm not that far off from that either because different tax brackets and I have no child benefits. But I made slightly more than that. I made an affordable wage in this area, which meant that I was able to go into the community and volunteer and actually give back because I love Waterloo so much. So I worry what will happen with them when they get kicked out. We are actually being forced to move outside of the city to find places that can potentially be affordable, but even then, we're running out of places. We'd have to go away from our communities, our friends, our networks, just to find a place to live. It's like, I don't want to leave Waterloo, but sometimes I wondered, when did we stop belonging here? And I do worry about the students. There's a student building next to us, and I'm pretty sure they're more affordable than some of the other units around. And it would break my heart that can't come to one of our universities here because they can't afford to live in this area. What students really want is affordable accommodations, places where they won't end up in debt for years on end. And if there were more affordable units, then we probably wouldn't have to worry about them renting out their dining room in order to make ends meet. What I am asking of the city and for developers that come into here is to really take into consideration the affordable housing that's being removed when developments go up. We can't keep on taking away affordable houses without replacing it with anything. And market rate right now is not affordable. For my current place, I'd be paying about $500 more to live. And right now in Waterloo, it's difficult to get a job that will pay that much because companies either want to pay you minimum wage or you have to be a specialist in some area in which you make over $20. There's really no in-between ground there, and there's far more companies that will only want to pay you minimum wage. And I know it's going to be another kind of kick in the gut every time I have to drive past there and see that there might be empty units that I can't even afford to live in, where my home used to be. It's like I'm around, and I've already seen a tent up in the city for people who can't afford to live in an apartment. And with the storm that happened last weekend, all I can do is hope that they found a dry place to stay. Because the reality is, people who live on the streets don't die of old age. They die of violence, disease. It is really time for the city and the developers to stop treating us like just numbers. We are people with stories and histories. We need equality and inclusion in this community. We deserve the right to be able to afford to live in this wonderful city. Thank you.
Very powerful. Very happy that you came up with this this personal story and the side of things that I know the council really cares about. We discussed in our strategic plan and address these issues in our community based on the lack of tools that we have from the province, but we do what we can. But any questions from council? Very powerful. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I'm gonna try and make a comment. Again, thank you very much for your presentation. Every time I hear a story like this, it's so deeply affecting, and I know as elected official up here, we're supposed to be the ones who have the answer to these questions, and I'm here to say that I don't have the answer today. Going back to our conversations with the delegates from Killam when we were talking about this issue and what can we do about it and what tools do we have, and the comment back is sort of thing that I acknowledge that, but to your point, it's a really I struggle very much with the idea that we are going to solve this problem by eliminating affordable housing. We already have a significant crisis in the region, and we're talking about eliminating housing to put up potentially not affordable housing. And that's why I think some of the questions that my colleagues around the table here have asked today are really important, and I know that they may not be the answers that will assist you, but I hope that we are able to get the answers that we need to assist others that are in similar situation to you. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Vasic, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, thank you. I mean, I guess I don't want you to talk to your personal details if you don't want to, but if you could maybe give us a sense of what might someone living in one of those apartments use that $500 for as a way to maybe help us understand how essential that is for everyday living. So if you were to use that $500, you were saying, towards increased market rent, what then are you unable to pay for?
Well, right now I live comfortably with the income that I have. basically I'd have to get a job that pays more in order to cover the difference in order to live in a place that's the equivalent to where I currently live. And jobs are not as easy to come by as people think, especially in an area that's very heavy in the tech sector. Because if you don't have tech skills, it's very hard to get a job that pays over $20 an hour.
Thank you, and I think that's also not a testament. You're clearly, as everyone who lives in low income, insightful, thoughtful. You've created an entire presentation. You're clearly hardworking, and you're budgeting on less than many of us in this room have, and so clearly you have all those capabilities, but what you're saying is the system is not set up to support the people who live in this community because for whatever reason you don't have the skills that we claim in this community are desirable. And so I think you are bringing up such an important point about the systemic barriers that people in this community face and how likely structurally what we value in people and in a community and what we're saying in what we value to those who don't fit that mold. And I think that's a really powerful story. And frankly, it's really messed up that we don't have homes in this community where everybody can live. And probably I'm not supposed to swear in council chambers, but I'm real pissed. So thank you for coming tonight. It was really powerful.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much. There are no more delegations, so this informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to council at a later date. Any new business? Seeing none. We have 4 bylaws here. Councillor Henry likes them, Councillor Freeman likes them. All those in favor? It's all of us. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Vasek, Councillor Bonagor, stand adjourned. What time is it for you?